I'd like to call this council and committee meeting to order. Before we proceed, I want to acknowledge that the land upon which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Adirondack, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe people. We're the beneficiaries of ancient agreements such as the dish with one spoon between the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee, who agreed to share the abundance of the land through peace, friendship, and mutual respect. The two-row wampum, by which the Haudenosaunee and the settlers agreed to share the land in mutual respect, and the Treaty of Niagara, considered by many First Nations to be a fundamental document in all future relations and treaties with the British. We recognize that we have a responsibility to be stewards of the land in cooperation and collaboration with the Indigenous peoples, not only for one generation, but for all generations to come. We understand that we have an obligation to learn the lessons of our history, educate ourselves about the experiences of the Indigenous people, and seek opportunities to heal the wounds that will result in reconciliation with our Indigenous sisters and brothers. Many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people continue to live and work in Fort Erie. We stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. We have the good fortune to live in a land of such abundance, diversity, and beauty. Let us be vigilant in protecting Turtle Island. Madam Clerk, the roll call, please.
All members of council are present. Mayor Redekop.
Thank you. There is no addendum this evening, just a very few brief announcements. The Truth and Reconciliation Walk, promoted by the Fort Erie Native Friendship Center and our Indigenous community, was held on Friday, September the 29th. The walk was from Mather Arch to the Friendship Center here on Buffalo Road, and there were probably, I'm going to say, 400, 500 people. Most of the councillors were there. A number of representatives from other levels of government were there, including MP Vance Badaway, and it was really quite a heartwarming procession of individuals, all ages. I know that some of the elders of the Indigenous community walked the entire way, which I think is just over 3 miles, and there was a nice program at the Native Friendship Center. The actual National Day of Truth and Reconciliation was Saturday, September the 30th. On the same day, there was also what is called North Star Day, and that is a day that is celebrated by the predecessors, the individuals whose ancestors sought freedom in Canada via the Underground Railroad. And Fort Erie was one of the main termini on the Underground Railroad. So on Saturday evening, I participated with DeWitt Lee and some of his friends in recognizing the 3rd annual North Star Day. He then embarked from Freedom Park here on the Niagara River across the Peace Bridge to Broderick Park, and then was brought back by his friend. The symbolism of that was he was representing the residents of Canada, including Indigenous people, who helped the slaves escape bondage and cross the Niagara River. And when you think about all of the trials, challenges, tribulations that individuals from the southern United States would have faced to get to the Niagara River, and then be faced with the Niagara River, pretty daunting. But that celebration took place on Saturday evening. On October the 29th, which I think is a Saturday as well, there will be, October the 28th, sorry, there will be another ceremony at Freedom Park, and that will be to recognize the landing of Josiah Henson, the escaping slave upon whom Uncle Tom's Cabin was based. So they're going to be recognizing that day, Saturday, October the 28th, and there'll be some information out on our website. And then finally, I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving next Monday evening, and hope that we all think about the things that we have to be thankful for living here in the country and the community that we live in. That's it for announcements. Declarations of pecuniary interest. If there are none, we've got a couple of, we've got an open house coming up with respect to a proposed draft plan of vacant land condominium on Hazel Street. That will be held Thursday, October the 5th at 5:30 p.m. here in the Atrium Town Hall. And this evening we have a couple of public meetings. These are public meetings under the Planning Act, and the process that will be followed is as follows. A member of staff will be providing council with some background information with respect to the application that's been made by the proponent for the proposed amendment. Members of council will have an opportunity to question the staff member at that point on her presentation. Following that, we will ask the proponent or the proponent's agent to address council if they wish, and they will also be subject to any questions that councillors might wish to ask. Thereafter, we will ask in order anyone who wishes, other than the applicant, to speak in support of the application, anyone who wishes to speak in opposition or has questions that they wish to ask council. I will then ask Mr. Patton if there's anyone waiting in the digital waiting room who wishes to address council. And then finally, I'll go to the clerk to ask the clerk if there's anyone who has submitted late communications to us relative to the application. So the first application under the Planning Act is a proposed draft plan of subdivision, official plan, and zoning bylaw amendment with respect to 1101 DiPietro Street. And I'm going to call upon Samantha Young, who will provide us with some background information. Good evening.
Good evening. Just gonna get settled here first. Okay, thank you. Okay, can everybody hear me well?
Speak up a little bit more. If you
A little bit louder?
Yeah.
That's better? Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Town Council, staff, and members of the public. The purpose of this public meeting is to provide information regarding the proposed plan of subdivision and official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 1101 DiPietro Street. The application was submitted by the agent, William Hycoop from Upper Canada Consultants, on behalf of the property owner, 1101 DiPietro Street Incorporated, Ahmad Ali. The purpose of these application is to permit development of 18 street townhouse dwellings with accessory apartments. The applicant is proposing to amend the official plan to a residential designation to allow medium-density residential development. The applicant is also proposing to rezone the subject property from a commercial zone to a site-specific residential multiple 1 zone to permit townhouse dwellings. The draft plan of subdivision proposes the creation of 3 blocks. Each block would contain 6 street townhouse units with accessory dwelling units along DiPietro Street. Notification of today's public meeting was provided in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act by placing a notice sign on the property on September 12, and all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property were mailed a notice of complete application and public meeting on that same day. Okay, so this slide shows a timeline of the development application process. In accordance with Bill 109, the proposed planning applications is subject to a 120-day processing and review timeline. The timeline starts the day the application is deemed complete, which was July 28th of this year, and will stop the day when council makes a decision on the application. Today marks day 66 of the 120-day timeline period. The subject property is located in the Weldon neighborhood of the town of Fort Erie on the north side of Garrison Road. The subject lands are approximately 0.45 hectares with 116 meters of frontage and contains 2 existing vacant buildings on there. So one building was the former Canadian Club, and the other building was the former Garrison Little Theater. Surrounding the subject lands include vacant residential land and single detached dwellings to the north. To the south, there are commercial buildings. To the east, there are single detached dwellings. And then to the west, there is a former railroad trail, sorry, and commercial buildings as well. There are 2 neighborhood parks within 2 kilometers of this property. There is Energy Field Park, which is 1.3 kilometers from the subject land, and the Douglas Park, which is located 1.9 kilometers from the subject property. It is the town's intent to feature a public trail behind the subject lands in the future, which would be this vacant parcel right here where my mouse is. The subject lands are designated commercial in the town's official plan, which are intended for various commercial uses. The applicant is proposing to redesignate the subject lands to urban residential to permit the proposed medium-density residential development. The urban residential designation is intended for a mix of housing forms and density ranges. This includes single detached and multi-unit dwellings, such as townhouses. The official plan provides the criteria for consideration when reviewing the proposals for medium-density residential uses. This will include, this is a summary, the height, bulk, and arrangement of buildings and structures to determine suitability with the existing neighborhood, appropriate open space, including landscaping, parking areas that are of sufficient size, and driveway access and pedestrian walkways. There are no natural heritage features, natural hazard areas, or fish habitat on the subject property as identified in the town's official plan. The property is also not identified as having any archaeological potential in Schedule D of the official plan. The subject lands are currently zoned site-specific general commercial. This is C2-115 zone in the town's zoning bylaw. The existing site-specific zoning provision only permits a private club, banquet center, gaming premise, and uses, and buildings and structures accessory thereto. A zoning bylaw amendment is required to permit the proposed townhouse development. Here's an aerial imagery dated 2020 of the subject property. The draft plan of subdivision is to create 3 blocks of 6 townhouse dwelling units in each. If the proposal is approved, a future part lot control application will follow to create the individual townhouse lots. The zoning bylaw amendment application proposes to rezone the subject lands to a site-specific residential multiple 1 zone to allow 18-unit street townhouse dwellings with an accessory apartment in the basement of each unit. The applicant notes that the accessory apartments are an optional feature for the future homeowners. The site-specific provisions are as follows. A reduced minimum lot frontage from 6 meters to 5.64 meters for interior lots. An increased residential density from 35 units per hectare to 40 units per hectare. This is an additional of 3 units on site. And lastly, to permit tandem parking associated with an accessory apartment where 1 space is provided in the garage and 1 is on the driveway. Here's a closer look at the RM1 zoning provisions and the zoning departures indicated in gray. So. Here are some images from a site visit. We can see that there are 2 buildings on site, and these are views from DiPietro Street. Okay, and these are some sample renderings of the townhouses that they're looking to be used for inspiration. A public information open house was held by town staff and hosted by the applicant in the atrium of Town Hall on September 7th of this year. There were 2 residents who attended this meeting and 1 written comment was received by staff. In summary of these comments received, 1 is site contamination, The residents inquired whether an environmental site assessment was completed. They had heard that there were some contamination on site and that may cause a health concern. Another concern or comments, suitability to establish neighborhood. The residents had concerns with the medium density development fitting with the established quiet neighborhood. Another is drainage. The residents indicated that they experience poor drainage and grading on their property, which is adjacent to the subject lands. They expressed that the proposed development would have an adverse impact on the drainage within the surrounding area. And then another is the existing condition of DiPietro Street. It is not well maintained, and they had inquired whether this would be improved in the future. And lastly, a public member expressed concerns with the parking requirement, and an overflow of street parking can occur. All right, so that concludes my presentation for today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Young. Any members of council have any questions? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop, to you too, Mrs. Young. Can you go to slide 9?
Yep, for sure.
That's it. My question is regarding the minimum lot frontage being 5.64, which is less than the 6 or what's required, but the backyards are quite deep.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason that they are not moving the whole thing down to give more room?
That is something that I can discuss with the applicant to see if it's a possibility to move it down further. Are you looking to inquire whether there could be additional parking spaces?
Basically, that it would definitely help. And there's the backyards are a decent size, and I'm all for large backyards. But considering they have 12 of the units don't meet the requirements, and they have big backyards. Just a thought.
Okay. One thing that I will note is, because I mentioned that there was open space being proposed at the rear of the property, where that, I guess, previous railroad would be. Because there isn't a timeline for when that would be instated, I think that is the intent of the applicant, to provide more generous rear yard amenity space for future residents to utilize that.
Okay, just one further question. In regards to the where the parks are, or the open space, I didn't get them all, but 2 kilometers, 1.8 kilometers. Then you mentioned something that they're planning on a trail. Where will this trail go to?
That's a good question. At this point, I don't know the details of where that trail will lead to. Looking at this aerial imagery, this one might be a good one here. So the trail, this here would be the proposed open space trail. So it would be along that parcel there.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further, Councillor Noyes? Anyone else? Yeah, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll make this quick, and thank you for the presentation. I just noticed on Walden Boulevard that I'm going to say 2/3 of that street does appear to have sidewalks. Is there any plan for sidewalks at the location or in front of these properties? I didn't see that in the drawing.
Through your worship, to Councillor Lewis. So as part of the application, we will be requesting the applicant to provide cash in lieu for a future 1.5 meter sidewalk construction. This would be along the frontage of the subject property.
Perfect, thank you.
So, Ms. Young, do we have a policy with respect to how close these developments should be to a park?
Through your worship, no, I do not know at this moment.
Okay. And you've indicated that the old abandoned rail line, that could be some time in the future.
Yes.
With respect to the parking, so we're talking about not only a resident of the building, but also then an accessory. So really two separate families living in the building. And the parking that's being proposed is tandem parking, so one vehicle behind another. And what is the likelihood that, do we know when this road is going to be upgraded or reconstructed, DiPietro?
Through your worship, at this time, I don't have a timeline for when it would be constructed, but it would be as a condition of draft plan to include an urbanized curb and gutter to improve the existing condition of DiPietro Street. But I can definitely follow up with town staff as well.
Right, if I might, so this property has a frontage of about 160 meters, which is almost 350 feet. Is there any reason why the sidewalk wouldn't be constructed at the same time as the road is reconstructed, or is that the plan from staff's perspective?
Through your worship, I think typically when it comes to constructing sidewalks, the intent is to construct it throughout the entirety of DiPietro Street comprehensively, so that way we can ensure that design and the urbanization of these improved streets would be done at the same time as opposed to in different stages. But that's definitely something as well that I can follow up with staff to see if there's any additional information that I can follow up with.
The difficulty with that, and maybe I'll raise that when we get to the report, is that money today may not cover the cost of a sidewalk 10 years from now, number one, and number two, the people live in the property for a while and then they realize there's going to be a sidewalk and they think that it's cutting back their front yard, which really isn't their front yard. So I'll raise that when we get to the report. So aside from the fact that there'll be potentially two families in each of these townhouses, there's a request to reduce the frontage from 6 meters to 5.64. Has there been any discussion with the developer about putting in a number of units that would at least meet the frontage requirement?
Through your worship, sorry, could you repeat the second half of your question?
Was there any discussion with the developer about actually wanting to put in the number of units that would comply with the zoning frontage as opposed to requesting a modification of that? Because we are talking really whatever number of units times two.
Mm-hmm.
Was there any discussion with the developer about that?
For sure, I can follow up with the developer on this.
Because then that would also have an impact on the other request for variation, which is the density. And the density here, even going to medium density, would be greater than what is provided for in the zoning.
Okay.
I think those are my questions at this point. Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Ms. Young. Thank you very much. Quick question. You had mentioned just a moment ago about urbanization of DiPietro and report being separate. Is it envisioned that it would be a full urbanization of DiPietro or just on the west side of DiPietro?
Through your worship to Councillor Dubanow, it would, to my knowledge, it would just be on the subject property's frontage there.
So it wouldn't be a full urbanization of DiPietro then? Okay, I'll be speaking more during the report, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Thank you very much, Ms. Young. Okay. So I'm going to ask if the proponent or the proponent's agent wishes to address council. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Thanks for having me this evening. I do have a brief PowerPoint presentation I would like to share with you.
Yes, and I'm sorry, and you are?
Sorry, my name is William Heikoop. I'm a planner with Upper Canada Consultants.
Thank you.
Representing the owner of the subject lands this evening. As noted, applications consist of the official plan, zoning amendment, and draft plan of subdivision. Samantha did a good job providing an overview of the subject lands, but I'll briefly do that again. We've got a subject site at 0.4497 hectares, or about 1.23 acres in size. They're located within the built-up urban area and are designated as commercial. And They are zoned as general commercial site-specific, which allows for private clubs, banquet centers, and gaming centers. Immediately to the north, we have vacant residential lands with surrounding residential properties to the north and east. Immediately to the west is the former railway and designated open space area. Further to the west and to the south are commercial uses. Here you can see the schedule of the official plan amendment requesting to change the land use designation from commercial to urban residential. Here you can see the zoning bylaw amendments schedule seeking to change the zoning from general commercial site-specific to residential multiple one site-specific zone. As noted, the zoning requested is to decrease the minimum lot frontage from 6 meters to 5.68 meters, or approximately 18.5 feet, to increase the maximum density from 35 to 40 units, which accommodates 3 additional dwellings, and to permit tandem parking to accommodate an additional legal parking space if an accessory dwelling unit is chosen to be created. We'll discuss that a little bit further in the presentation. Here you can see the proposed draft plan of subdivision consisting of 3 townhouse blocks with 6 units each, yielding a total of 18 street townhouse dwellings. As discussed, you can see the geometry of the site changes along the frontage of DiPietro Street. The depth of the subject land varies from approximately 36 meters to about 40 meters in depth, whereas a typical residential lot is approximately 30 meters in depth. This will assist in providing sufficient area for the dwellings and provide for an increased rear yard area that ranges from 11 to 16 meters in depth. And the reason for this is to accommodate an existing CNP hydro easement and existing hydro lines that traverse along the open space railway just on the inside of the property. Here you can see an example rendering of the proposed townhouses from another project in Welland that the owners are currently undertaking. The proposed dwellings include 2-story townhouse dwellings and include various architectural details, including brick masonry, vinyl siding, and glazing on their garage doors. These various treatments, along with the variation of the front wall, will help provide a variation and soften the streetscape and aesthetic look. In addition to the application, a couple studies and reports were prepared with the submission. So a phase 1 and 2 environmental site assessment was completed. The assessment conducted included samples of the soil and groundwaters. They have been confirmed to meet the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Parks standards. We're currently undertaking a record of site condition from the MECP and hope to achieve that shortly. It is anticipated that there'll be a condition of draft approval to address that final acknowledgement letter. Further, the functional servicing report has been prepared to discuss how the development is to be serviced, and it concludes there are access and capacity to existing stormwater, sanitary, and water main systems. I will note that as part of this development proposal and the urbanization of the west side of DiPietro Street, a new storm sewer would be installed to the intersection at Walden and DiPietro. And furthermore, the request for cash in lieu of the sidewalk is in part to provide a pedestrian connection to other pedestrian facilities. Right now, the existing commercial development at the corner of Walden and Garrison Road encroaches onto the property line, making it very difficult to complete that connection in the public right-of-way without going into the paved portion or of the vehicular portion of DiPietro Street. So just providing some further background there. Just to summarize things, in regard to the tandem parking, we've included this request as an opportunity, not as will have in every single unit. We've purposefully increased the width of the side yards on the end units on the exterior sides. It's anticipated that if someone desires to have an accessory dwelling unit, that they would be located on those end units, therefore giving additional space and access around the side of the unit. So each of those end units actually exceeds the zoning requirement for frontage. So the inside units, we're really looking for 1.5 feet of extra space. And we feel that the very deep lots provide a balancing act to that reduced frontage. Overall, with the tandem parking for the dwelling units, we have had experiences in many of the developments that look and seek to market as multi-generational housing. We've got some examples in Niagara Falls that have been successful where there's younger adult kids or older parents that would like to live with other family members, and often a parking situation can easily be arranged between those family members. That being said, I understand we cannot control whether or not they decide to do that, but from a location perspective and from a planning perspective, we're to promote pedestrian connectivity and reduce vehicular dependence throughout the community, and due to its proximity to Garrison Road and commercial amenities, we feel it's appropriate to include this to help reduce the cost and increase the attainable price range for these dwelling units and continue to provide for an evolving built form, helping meet the needs of citizens across the municipality. So in summary, we have applications for official plan, zoning, bylaw, and draft plan of subdivision in front of you, and I am certainly here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Heikoop. Any questions? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. Thank you, Mr. Heikoop, for your presentation. I noticed that you used the word attainable, not affordable. Would there be any that would be considered affordable under the definition?
At this time, no.
Okay, thank you. In regards to the driveway, again, I would like to see a longer driveway and a smaller backyard, just because I think parking is going to be a big issue. Regardless, even if your son moves in with you, he's still going to have his vehicle, I'm going to have my vehicle. But anyway, with the sidewalks going in, that's not going to, again, it may not go in right away, but how is that going to affect the depth of the driveway itself? Right now, it's only 6 meters, but many times people assume that they own right up to the road, and they don't. Will you make it a point to make sure that anybody who is purchasing this is very clearly told that this is where your property ends, this is likely to be a sidewalk, so you're not going to have the additional 10 or 15 feet that you think is yours? Can you make sure that some of that goes on when it comes to that stage?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, certainly I would even suggest that it may be appropriate to include a sidewalk design as part of our detailed engineering design, so that it's very clearly illustrated on the plans. When an owner is inquiring and purchasing a lot, they'd be able to see a site plan that shows that sidewalk. Furthermore, that would then be enshrined in the subdivision agreement, ensuring that any owner and any lawyer who does a title search would quickly come to the realization that this has always been planned to go in.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's an excellent idea, Mr. Heikoop, and I trust Ms. Young has picked that up. Any other members of council? So I just want to be clear here. I understand your comment that we don't know how many of these 18 units might take advantage of the opportunity to have an accessory unit, but it could be all 18. And it's not necessarily just those on the end, correct?
Correct.
Because you have no control, the developer has no control over that. Excuse me. And it could very well be that, as you've pointed out, this could be generational members in a family, and they might be able to work out a parking thing, but it might not be. It might be somebody that's renting a unit in the house, correct?
Understood, yes.
And then that creates the problems of how they're going to manage this tandem parking. And the easiest way to deal with it would be to park on the street. And I'm sure you're familiar with that. So that, I don't know what the terrain is like in Welland, but I'm familiar with what the terrain is like here. So that would be a concern. Did your client consider putting in the number of units that would permit him to comply with both the density and the frontage.
Yeah, ultimately, we did look at that. Just as I indicated previously, we wanted to increase the side yard setback. It's kind of hard to see on this image here, but generally speaking, we have over 2 meters up to close to 2.5, 2.45 meters of a side yard. So that would aid if someone was to include a walkway around to the back. So that was really the conception of this project, in the sense that to accommodate those accesses around the side, we look to reduce the frontage. As I indicated, we're looking for that 1.5 extra feet, and I think that provides the opportunity for the accessory dwellings. So it's really done part and parcel to each other, rather than evaluated independently. So that's how we came forward with the plan as proposed today.
Well, thank you for explaining that. And in terms of the FSR, you know that that's referred to in the report that's been provided to council.
Yes.
So you know that it's being peer reviewed by our staff, and that we have concerns about the capacity of the sewer in that area. You're aware of that?
I am aware of those. We've been in discussions with Public Works about that. We've provided the required fee to have that peer review undertaken. So we certainly acknowledge that there are concerns, and we hope to be able to work through those.
Good. Just wanted to make that clear, because your slide did suggest that there is capacity. We've got concerns about that. Anyone else? Thank you very much, Mr. Haiku.
Thank you.
Is anyone who wishes, who's here, other than the owner, who wishes to speak in support of the application? Just hold your horses. I see. Because, okay, so I have to keep a record of this. So now we're going to go to anyone who wishes to speak in opposition or address council with respect to the matter. I'm going to go with the, oh yeah, is there anyone, Mr. Patton, is there anyone online who wishes to speak in favor of the application? They can raise their hand now.
There's one person, Your Worship, but I think, I'm going to give them a second, but I think
To
there's
raise
another
matter? Yep, okay. So barring no one from the digital waiting room, we'll go then, I'm going to go with the lady in the back with the dark top. You had your hand up? Yes. Of course. Safety in numbers. And for the record, everyone that does address council, I need the name and address.
Good evening, Mayor and Honourable Council. My name is Rosemary Morris. This is my husband, Ronald Morris. We are incoming residents of Fort Erie. We moved here in 2020, purchased the home in 2019. So our home...
And your address is?
Our home is 1080 Di Pietro Street. We are the new bungalow directly across the street from the Italian Centre. When we were notified of this proposal, in all honesty, I was very shocked and very disappointed that it would even be entertained. I have been a realtor for 40 years, and I lived in one of the fastest growing cities in North America, and that was Brampton, Ontario. I was very involved in every aspect of town hall meetings and realtor meetings and the whole bit. So my concerns were immediately drawn to the fact that, contrary to the sketch that was provided, giving you an idea of what these townhomes will look like, that's a picture of a two-storey townhome development. These are 3 stories. 3 stories are almost 40 feet in height. Di Pietro.
Can I just get clarification on that, because I think it's only 2 stories. Yes, it may have been 3 at one point, but it's only 2 stories.
Okay, well, the paperwork you provided to us says 3. Right.
Both my staff member and Mr. Hycoop indicating it's 2 stories, and the
Okay.
report to us says 2 stories. Yeah.
So,
You've already had impact on that.
so right there, if it's going to be a two-story, the garage is not going under the home now?
Well,
Can anybody answer me that one? Because in order to have a two-story dwelling, you would have to have a basement then for the ancillary apartment, but for the two-story to be functional, the garage would have to be outside of the house. So it's not. So then we're not being given the correct information then to begin with. My main, very, very important concern is with regard to the parking, obviously. Since we moved in, we had a bit of a reprieve because of COVID and there wasn't a lot of traffic. But every now and again, the street gets pretty busy. It's a very narrow street. And if Fort Erie is going to grow the way that all the other towns and cities are growing, the chances are there will be two families in every one of these dwellings because this the only cost-effective way to be able to afford them. And that being the case, I bet you there'll be at least 1.5 children per household. And if there's no sidewalks and there's no play area for where these kids are to go, is it going to be okay and acceptable to the town of Fort Erie that the kids play in the middle of the street? Especially so close to an intersection without traffic lights, Walden and Garrison, right? So DiPietro goes out, Walden goes out onto Garrison. Like this is a very, very short distance from there. And I have absolute nightmares thinking about kids playing on that street with not even a sidewalk, you know. I think it's something that really has to be seriously considered. I'm really not in favour of townhomes at all, but I think there's a gap between what is necessary and what is truly attainable. And if townhouses have to be approved for whatever reason, then I don't see why there has to be 18. I think they should have to conform to the regulations and possibly leave some sufficient parking areas at the sides of those buildings. Because right now I look at it and I think, okay, you can see little pathways through between. I don't know if the average fire department truck would get through there, but all I can see is that people are either going to store bicycles or motorbikes or small cars or garbage cans. So when an emergency vehicle has to get through, it will be like being back in Brampton. Nobody will be able to get through. So that to me is a very big concern. And you know, I think reducing the number of units, he's still going to make one heck of a massive profit. And I know that because figures are my business. So I beg you, I implore you to really consider refusing this in this present format altogether. Part of the reason that we bought on DiPietro was coming from a large city and looking for somewhere to enjoy our retirement years. We specifically picked out that area because it was all detached homes, all fairly decent sized lots. And although, yes, we have a little bit of a problem with the commercial being as close as it is because it can get very noisy sometimes, for the most part, it's a very quiet, lovely little subdivision. Good neighbours, everybody takes care of their property, and I just don't feel that this is the best use of this land. My last concern is with regard to further up the street. A builder already has the remainder of that part of the street already zoned for 4 detached dwellings. So this is obviously going to impact that builder severely because I don't know how many people are going to want to buy a $900,000 detached next to 18 townhouses. So are we going to be looking at him coming back, looking to amend his plan so that we end up with more townhouses? You know, and as you're well aware, at the other side of the street, the Benjamin's Balance has been for sale forever We have no idea what will be built to suit there. So I just feel as if it's went from being a beautiful single-family community to possibly being kind of bombarded onto that one street, you know, and that's a big, big concern. So I ask for all of you to please give this some very, very serious consideration, and not just from the point of view that, yes, it impacts us as the homeowners, but anywhere else that I have ever lived, the builder has a responsibility to put in some areas that the children can play and things like that. You know, take away 4 of these townhouses, make them conform. All of a sudden there's a bit of land where kids can have a park and things like that. But to just jam all these in, all this is about is money. That's my 2 cents worth, and I thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Ms. Morris. Before you go, are there any members of council that have any questions? No. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Wright, you had your hand up. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council and town members. I do have a few concerns with this, and some of it comes from my background.
Need your name and address.
Name is Scott Raitt, W-R-A-I-G-H-T, 1122 DiPietro Street. I am directly across from the 3 proposed single-dwelling homes. I've been a member, I'm now a life honorary member of the Fort Erie Fire Department. This street, 2 standard-sized pickup trucks cannot pass without somebody going on the shoulder. Yes, we had the Italian Hall and they ran their pasta nights. Vehicles lined both sides of the street. 1 vehicle could go down the road. There's nights a fire truck would not get down that road. By looking at this, and as I learned tonight, a proposal of 18 units with apartments, I do not know anybody in a family who only has 1 car. Minimum 2. So let's go worst case scenario, 18 with 2 vehicles per family for the house, 2 for the apartment. That's 72 vehicles. That's 500 times the number of vehicles of the residents of that street. With that many vehicles and the short frontage, there's maybe 2 spaces in between these buildings where people could park on that side of the road. That means they're going to be parking on the east side of the road. I did the measurements with vehicles going from the corner of DePetrio, where it meets Walden, having to leave a certain distance for not parking near the stop sign. You only fit 18 vehicles on the other side of the road. So if residents on our side have a visitor parking out front, and these people are parking on the road, that's a lot of traffic on a road that's not designed to take it or support it. As well as Councillor Dubanow knows, in the town I've reported before, we have sinkholes on that street. They don't know why there's sinkholes. Pre-COVID, our street wasn't even on the list to be upgraded. Walden and Mather were to be done in 2023, and that was pre-COVID, so that's all been pushed out. So we have soft shoulders. Shoulders aren't wide enough to take a car off the road as it is. So all this proposal is putting a lot of traffic in an area that will not handle it. Number 2, they're not going to park in the garage. They got their garbage cans. The middle units can't get to their backyard to have a shed to keep any of that in. It's all going to be in the garage. The size of these units and the size of the garage proposed is not going to take a good-sized family vehicle or a minivan or an SUV with the garbage, the bikes, and everything else. I'm all for development, but it's got to be reasonable development. As this unit stands now, I did the measurements, and I've converted it here, pardon me 1 second. I'm used to working in feet. 453 meters or 1,500 feet of building. And the total measurement works out to 1,361 meters across all the units, with 2 gaps of about 20 feet in between. That's a lot of breeze that's stopped that we currently have. That's changing a lot of airflow. I'm a resident, I can keep my windows open and get a breeze all year. I've got single-family homes that are proposed across from me unless that developer changes, seeing that this gets approved. That's the other concern. If this gets approved, is he going to come back, and is he going to now want townhomes? So there again, that's more cars. Traffic problem at Walden and DePietro. You can have one car sitting on Walden to get out onto Garrison, and then the cars on DePietro are at the second car's side door. I could see that as being a very bad traffic incident. And while we're talking size, where are they going to put the snow? These are individual owned homes. It's not a development where somebody's coming in with commercial equipment to move the snow. There's not enough front yard to support the snow load from the driveway to shovel it onto because they're so narrow. So are they going to push it on the road? Are they going to push it across to us? The town really has nowhere with a big plow to relocate all that snow if it's pushed out to the road. And that just, again, makes traffic problems an issue. I've seen developments like this in Niagara Falls. I've seen developments like this in Welland. They've gone through. You go in the neighborhoods afterwards, there's not a parking space available on the street, day or night. Well, bylaw officers, are you going to sit down there all winter? Police? Like, I'm just, again, I'm for development. I'm okay. I came from big cities, but I'm here because it needs to be reasonable development. That same builder could put some very good homes across from there, or even semis with spaces in between, and still make a very good profit for himself and blend into the neighborhood. They like the neighborhood. They want to build there because of how nice it is across the road, how it looks. So I would just hope the council will look at this, because unfortunately, when it's all said and done, the builder leaves, he's gone. We have to live with it for the rest of our lives in these homes. And that's a tough pill to swallow, that they've made their money and they're gone, there's no recourse to them. People move in, well, that's on the new homeowners. And everything they do over there is going to come to our side of the street, because they can't park on their side. So pulling into my driveway, I'm going to have cars on both sides of my driveway I have to try and see past to pull out. That's all I have.
Thanks very much, Mr. Reid. Any members of council have any questions? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else who wishes to address council with respect to this matter? Please come forward, sir. I need your name and address for the record.
Mr. Mayor, Council, my name is Paul Sherwood. Live at 528 Murdoch Avenue, corner of Murdoch and DiPietro. My concern is the parking. I've lived in my house for 30 years, 2-car garage, never put a car in it. Put 1-car garage, never put a car in it. They only have spot for 1 car. That's it. I didn't lose any sleep over it, but that's it.
Don't go away, we might have a question. You have a big driveway, don't you?
Not that big.
Okay. Any members of council have any questions? Thanks very much, Mr. Sherwood.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to address council on this matter? Mr. Patton, is there anyone in the digital waiting room that wishes to address council? Thank you. And Madam Clerk, did we have any correspondence that hasn't been referred to in the report, or from someone other than whom we've heard from this evening?
No further electronic comment submissions, Mayor
Okay.
Redekop.
Okay, then I'm going to declare this public meeting closed, and we're going to go to the report PDS 64 2023. Do I have a mover? Councillor Dubanow. Any questions or comments? I'm going to go with Councillor Dubanow and then Councillor Noyes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship. And just a few comments, and I appreciate the residents coming out and speaking to this evening. I definitely understand the concerns that were raised with regard to parking and the kind of closeness of the units there. Certainly, with this being an information report tonight, this information is being provided to planning staff And then we're going to have a subsequent recommendation report, which is hopefully going to take some of this input here and try to find a way to work together the input from the public and council. The parking concern is something that, just the thought of, parking in front of a house, if driveways are so close together and you can't park safely, it kind of really throws the area off. I don't know what the solution to that is. I don't know if it's about eliminating units or moving the units around to do something, but that might be a way to address that. With regard to the road, I completely agree. That road is in no condition to accept any additional development. Well, hang on. I'm going to clarify that, guys.
So, before you go on, this isn't a sporting event, so we don't clap and we don't boo. Particularly don't boo.
You might boo me after I clarify what I'm going to say. I think the road is going to require some urbanization. And if you looked at the report here, it actually outlined the encroachments that the Italian Hall had on the road, which made the road narrower. And if we actually are able to utilize a proper urban cross-section, get a boulevard in there, I think that's going to help. It's going to widen the road. You will be able to get a fire truck down that road if there's parking. Anyone who was here prior to 2020 knows what that road was like when the Italian Hall was in operation. Anyone who is in the area or works in the area, and I do, would see those stream of cars coming in every Thursday evening, up and down Walden, and then right at the corner and up DiPietro, and they were parked all over the place. So there's always been parking challenges and concerns in this area. It has not always been super quiet. And I think we have an opportunity now to improve the situation, knowing that the Italian Hall isn't going to be in operation, and you're going to have 100 cars there every Thursday night, if not more often. So as long as we get a curb and a gutter and do some urbanization, I think that's going to help. Certainly, I hope as we move forward that this is something we can actually put in a site plan, maybe something in a council report to put residents at ease so they realize that, it's not going to be a narrow right-of-way, that we're actually going to have some wider roadway there to pass through, because it's definitely in the condition it's in now. It needs to change, and I'm appreciative that they're going to do that. I think we need to possibly even look at a full urbanization, possibly on the other side of the road, but that's another conversation for another time. I'm going to be voting in favor of this as an information report. Those are just my comments right now of where we are. I look forward to seeing what we have come forward in a recommendation report, and I hope we have a clarified site plan that shows where the sidewalks are going to be, where the actual delineation of the road is, where the road starts, where the curb is going to be, because it's really hard to envision what that street is going to look like right now with the Italian Hall parking lot encroaching onto the road. And as long as we receive that information, I think it'll give us a better idea of where we can go from there. Those are just my comments, Your Worship. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Dubanow. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. I'm also concerned about the parking. I think the residents are absolutely correct. It's going to be a nightmare. And most people don't know, but our bylaw does, that you can't park within 1.2 meters of a driveway. So the parking is going to be on the opposite side of the street because they're wider lots. The fact that the width of the road, I'm wondering if anybody knows the width of the road that's exists today? Do we know the width of the road? I hear it's narrow, but what narrow? Okay.
So why don't we let staff respond to that? Do we know the width of this road allowance? We don't know the width of the traveled portion, but is it a standard road allowance width?
Mr. Mayor, it's a two-lane road, I know that.
Yeah, okay. So that's information that we'll have to get for the recommendation report. No, no, you don't get to participate when council discusses this. Sorry.
I'll tell you how wide it was when the plow comes down. It covers the
Yeah,
road.
so I think, yeah, okay. So your opportunity to speak would have been before. Anyways, we'll get that information in the recommendation report so that council has that information available to us. Appreciate your effort to be helpful.
And my other concern is the density. I mean, again, this is, I think as someone likes to put, one of the former councillors saying you're trying to fit, again, 10 pounds of sugar in a 5-pound bag, and I think this is another example of it. I think very much if he decreased the units instead of 4 to 3, you'd have wider driveways, more parking spots, and I think more green space like larger backyards for the kids or whatever they're playing since they're so close. So I'm not in favor of the 18 units. I think it needs to be decreased. And I think the driveways need to be made longer. But I guess, and I'm also very concerned about the capacity for wastewater. I know that's in the report and that has to be clarified first. And it's hard to make a decision when you don't have all the information, and that's some information we just don't know yet, and I know we're getting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. Any other councillors? Councillor Lewis?
I know this is hard to believe, but I will be brief. I just have a couple of comments, and I agree with the majority of the comments made by staff, and I think with this being an information report, the developer here and planning staff, there is some opportunity to move things around and potentially come back with something that does check most of the boxes for council. Councillor Noyes and the mayor, you picked up on this earlier with respect to the infrastructure concern, and my question is, if we already have applicants in the queue with applications already, for lack of better words, time-stamped, where does that put them in relation to the infrastructure issue over a new development coming in that up until now does not have a timestamp?
So they don't get time-stamped, but Mr. Hurlovich, can you comment on that? My understanding is if you get approval, you proceed if you're ready to proceed, and no matter when your approval date was, you have to fulfill all the conditions, but it depends on what the status of the infrastructure is. But you're the professional here, maybe you can provide some clarity on that.
Yes, Your Worship, to the councillor. So the servicing or connection of the services will really come on a first-come, first-served basis. So it may not be the first person past the gate with his approval. It's going to be the first person to get his building permit. It's going to get the services. And if you come later and there's no capacity, then you will have to wait.
Councillor Lewis?
No, and thank you for the clarity. That was partially what I understood, but you clarified the other half. So thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Hurlovich, maybe you can just provide some context here in terms of Bill 23 and why it would be that a new housing unit could be created with the potential expressed at the outset that there be an accessory unit. Is that anything to do with Bill 23?
Yes, it is, Your Worship. Actually, Bill 23 would allow up to 3 units on a lot. But given the actual configuration of these properties, then it would be 2 units, and that's what they're proposing. As I understand, it's an alternative. So it may be that a homeowner, in order to offset some of his costs, may opt to have the basement finished with a second unit. Some may not.
Do the changes that have been brought about by the provincial government through Bill 23 relative to accessory apartments have any parking requirements? In other words, is there a need for there to be at least available parking space if there are going to be additional accessory apartments or units?
The Act actually just says it encourages parking and would provide that in tandem. It doesn't require it. So we are basically requiring the 2 spaces, but are allowing them in tandem, or considering them in tandem, I should say.
Thank you. And Mr. Hurlovich, I don't know whether you want to answer this or whether I should get Ms. Young to come back up to respond to this. Councillor Lewis alluded to it, and that is we're looking at a parcel of property that's 120 to 130 by about 340 feet wide. And one can't help but think that there's got to be a better orientation for housing units on that parcel rather than have all of them face DiPietro, where we know there's going to be a parking problem. We know that, as sure as we sit here. So I'm wondering, Ms. Young, if you would mind coming back up, if you can advise whether there have been any discussions about with the developer about any type of different orientation of housing units on this large parcel.
Through your mayor, the application that's been submitted, they are proposing to have frontage along DiPietro Street. There weren't much further discussions on having them face in a different direction.
So I don't think you were the planner, but we just recently dealt with a condominium townhouse proposal off of Dominion Road in Ridgeway, which had a parcel of land fronting on Dominion Road, but the orientation of all the units was to an internal road. So I'm wondering whether there isn't something that you might want to discuss, or that the planning staff might want to discuss with the developer in terms of having maybe a couple of driveways or roadways come off of DiPietro to accommodate the number of units. I'm not necessarily thinking that 18 units is appropriate, because it does call for an increased density over the proposed zoning. But I'm wondering whether that might not be more helpful in terms of dealing with some of the concerns that most of the councillors who have spoken have expressed. So I'll leave that with you. I also wanted to just clarify, and maybe Mr., thank you, Ms. Young, Mr. Walsh, do we not have a bylaw that says you're not supposed to be parking on the street during certain winter months, like sometime in November until sometime in April?
Yes, we do.
Which would mean that if there are excess vehicles in a development of this nature, and the owner was proposing to park on the road, he wouldn't be able to do that overnight during those months,
That's correct.
or could risk being either fined or towed away.
I'm not sure about towed away, but fine, certainly.
Okay. And then the other question that I had, just bear with me for a second. And this is a question that might, it applies to both of the public meetings this evening, and actually the subdivision agreements in general. There's a reference to certain provisions being included in the subdivision agreement relative to agreements of purchase and sale. And so in this particular case, I'm talking about page 33 and condition 4. This talks about proximity to adjacent industry and commercial retail plazas and the noise, et cetera. My question would be this: is it adequate just to have, is this wording adequate for this to be brought to the attention of subsequent owners of these units if they're ever built? Or should the provision be more specific so that every future agreement of purchase and sale has to contain this type of provision, whether it's from the developer to the original unit owner or every subsequent unit owner? Or does the fact that it's in the subdivision agreement presume that's the case? Sorry, that's a legal question, but you're the planner here this evening, and maybe you could get that clarified for us?
So, Your Worship, the subdivision agreement travels with the land. So if you purchase a property, then that subdivision agreement applies to you and any subsequent landowner. So yes, they're also bound by that requirement, but I'm going to suggest that there are very few people who read the subdivision agreement once they've purchased a house.
I'm wondering if there are enough lawyers that read the subdivision agreements. Okay. Thank you very much. If there are no other questions or comments, I'll call the question with respect to the recommendation that council receive this report for information purposes. We go from here. This information is left with staff to have further discussions with the developer. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. That then takes us to the next public meeting, which is a public meeting relative to a draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment for 3458 Black Creek Road. We're going to follow the same format, and we're going to start with the same staff member, Ms. Young, who's obviously been very busy.
All right. Okay. I'll just wait for the presentation slides to come up. Black Creek, yep. Okay. Good evening again, Mayor and Town Council, staff, and members of the public. The purpose of this public meeting is to provide information regarding the proposed draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment for 3458 Black Creek Road. The application was submitted by the applicant, Eric Potts from Cortec Group, on behalf of the property owner, Crystal Ridge Homes, Jeff Davis. The purpose of these applications is to permit the development of 6 street townhouse dwellings and 1 semi-detached dwelling with 2 units in total there. The applicant is proposing to rezone the subject lands to a site-specific residential multiple 1 zone to permit townhouse dwellings and semi-detached dwellings. The site-specific provision was requested for a reduction in the planting strip width. The draft plan of subdivision proposes the creation of the individual lots at this stage. Notification of today's public meeting was provided in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act by placing a notice sign on the property on September 12, and all property owners within 120 meters of the subject property were mailed a notice of complete application and public meeting on the same date. This slide shows a timeline of the development process. In accordance with Bill 109, the proposed planning applications is subject to a 90-day processing and review timeline. The timeline starts the day that the application is deemed complete, which was August 9th of this year, and will stop when Town Council makes a decision on the application. And today marks day 54 of the 90-day timeline. The subject lands are located in the Douglastown Black Creek neighborhood of town of Fort Erie. The subject lands are approximately 0.24 hectares in area and have a 45.7 meter of frontage along Black Creek Road. An existing single detached dwelling is on the subject lands, and it is being proposed to be demolished to accommodate the development proposal. The nearest park or open space is AC Douglas Park. This is located approximately 160 meters from the subject property, and it's to the west. AC Douglas Park 2 is also located to the northeast of the subject lands, and it's approximately 500 meters away. The land uses surrounding this subject property is to the north, south, east are single detached dwellings, and to the west there is vacant land, but these lands have been draft approved for residential development of single detached, semi-detached, and townhouses. The subject lands are designated low-density residential in the Douglastown Black Creek Secondary Plan in the town's official plan. Lands designated as low-density residential shall be reserved for single-detached, semi-detached, and duplex dwellings and accessory uses. Townhouse dwellings are typically considered a medium-density residential use. The secondary plan permits medium-density residential development in areas designated as low-density residential through a zoning bylaw amendment application. Provided that consideration to suitability and size of the site, proximity to arterial roads, and parks or open space areas are included. The secondary plan establishes a density of 17 to 50 units per hectare for medium-density residential. The proposal provides a density of 33.3 units per hectare. There are no natural heritage features, natural hazards, or any fish habitat that impacts the subject lands according to Schedules C and C1 of the official plan, and the subject lands are not identified as having any archaeological potential in Schedule D of the town's official plan. The subject lands are currently zoned residential 1 in the town's zoning bylaw. And the permitted uses in the R1 zone include single detached and accessory uses. A zoning bylaw amendment is required to permit the proposed townhouses and semi-detached dwellings. A zoning amendment proposes to rezone the subject lands from residential 1 to a site-specific residential multiple 1 zone to permit a 8-unit residential development. The site-specific regulation was requested for a reduced planting strip width along the townhouse development's exterior and interior side lot lines. So here's an aerial imagery of the site from 2020. And then this is an image of the draft plan of subdivision. It proposes to create the individual lots for the 6 townhouse units and 2 semi-detached units. Comments provided from members of the public at the open house and through written comments expressed that new developments are not meeting the town standards provided in the zoning bylaw. In addition, the town's development engineering staff commented that a 7x7 daylighting triangle will be required at the corner of Black Creek Road and Westbrook Avenue. Given the comments received, the applicant revised their proposal to comply with the provisions of the RM1 zone for the proposed development, and they also included the requested 7x7 daylighting triangle at the corner here. As mentioned, the initial submission requested a reduction in the planting strip width from 4 meters to 3.75 meters where it abuts a street, and 3 meters to 1.5 meters where there are more than 3 residential dwelling units abutting a residential zone. So that's indicated in the red circles. The applicant was able to address the zoning requirements by reducing the lot frontages for the semi-detached dwelling lots and increasing the front and interior side yard setbacks of the townhouse block to accommodate the required planting strips. They have also pushed the semi-detached dwellings back for a 8-meter long driveway. And this is a closer look at the zoning requirements and proposed provisions for the townhouse dwellings. They are meeting all of the zoning requirements for the RM1 zone for the townhouses. And then here are the zoning requirements and proposed provisions for the semi-detached dwellings. They are subject to the R3 zone requirements under the RM1 zones. Again, they are also meeting the zoning requirements under the R3 zone. Here are some images from a site visit. This is the view from Westbrook Road, Avenue, and then a view from the corner of Westbrook Avenue and Black Creek. And then here are some conceptual renderings of the townhouses. Up top are the front view of the townhouses, and then on the bottom are the rear views. And then these are conceptual renderings for the semi-detached. So that, again, at the top will be the front view of the semi-detached dwellings, and then at the bottom is the rear view of the semi-detached. A public information open house was held by town staff and hosted by the applicant in the town hall on September 6th of this year. There were 8 residents who attended this meeting, and 6 written comments were received by staff. In summary of the comments and concerns received, members of the public expressed that the addition of 7 new residential units would not be acceptable standards and will have a negative impact on the existing stormwater and sanitary infrastructure. In regards to character and compatibility, the established neighborhood consists of traditional single-detached dwellings. Residents expressed that the proposed development is out of character for this area with respect to the proposed lot size and modern design. The public noted the developer is offering 3-story dwellings with a flat roof. The And the public also requests a development that is of 1 to 2 stories in height, lower density, and a design that will resemble and blend in with the character of current homes. The public also requested larger driveways to accommodate a minimum of 2 or more parking spaces per dwelling unit to prevent off-street parking along Westbrook Avenue and Black Creek Road. The public noted a typical family would have more than 2 vehicles. And lastly, residents have noted that the draft approved Spring Creek Estate subdivision includes over 200 units that will significantly increase traffic volume, and the proposed development would further increase traffic volume and impact public safety. And those are the concerns received. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Young. Members of Councillor Noyes and then Councillor Dubanow.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I notice drainage is an issue here. I know it came up in the public, and it is an issue. There's a problem now with some of the houses on Westbrook and the ones, I guess, to the left of it. And I'm reading this report. It talks about that the downspouts can only go to the front yard. How big is this front yard?
Through your worship to Councillor Noyes, the front yard is meeting the required landscaping requirement, which is 30% in this case. But the front yard for the townhouses is providing the 6-meter front yard setback to the garage and the dwelling.
Thank you, Mr. Young. I understand that, but the actual green, the actual lawn, take the driveway away. You have your 6 meters, and there's a house right next to it, another driveway. How much grass do we actually have in front of that house that's going to take all the water that's going to fall on that house? Because it all has to be gone. It all has to go to the front yard. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, even the sump pump is going to shoot it to the front yard. So, having said all that, are we confident that the small front actual grass is going to be able to take all the water that is displaced by this house, including the sump pump, including the downspouts?
Through your mayor to Councillor Noyes, the FSR that was submitted, we have been in discussion with the applicant, the agent on file, because there will be some revisions requested from town staff, and we have shared these comments with the applicant. So there will be some slight revisions to the FSR, and they will also be required to pay the fee for the town consultant to review the FSR to ensure that the drainage will be adequate and not have negative impacts on abutting properties. But this will be something that we will have continued conversation and can provide some information at the recommendation report.
And I appreciate, again, it's, you know, it's evolving and things. But again, I think considering the sump pump and the downspouts are all going to this very, very small green space, let's say it doesn't hold it. Are we perhaps creating a problem that the sump pump never shuts off because the water just goes back to the foundation of the house, or that the water starts going over the sidewalk, which will eventually be there, or the road?
Through your mayor to Councillor Noyes, I'll definitely make note of these comments, and I'll get back in the recommendation report.
Okay, thank you. The other thing it talked about a secure outlet. I'm just wondering, where would the secure outlet be?
Which page are you referring to, Councillor Noyes?
I have to find it again. It's in the report, and I'm just trying to think where I saw it. Again, I can't find the exact spot, but it does talk about a secured outlet for the drainage.
If I may, through your worship to Councillor Noyes, that is actually one of the comments received by town staff. We have requested to identify those locations. So we have been in communication with the applicant about that too. And he is available today. He will be attending virtually, so hopefully he can provide some more insight at this public meeting.
Thank you, but it is on page 10. The last paragraph above 1, stormwater management report. Where it talks about a suitable and secured outlet. And I understand too, again, that just going over the drainage part, is that you're not going to be able to put it in any of the roadside ditches. So anyway, thank you.
Any other further councillors? Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And through you, Ms. Young, I'm just wondering if you could go back to slide 5 of your presentation for me, please. Thank you. Yep, that's the one. So we have the parcel that is in question highlighted in black right there. Now that area to the west, that's in orange, that's a medium density area. Now, am I correct that townhouses would be permitted in that parcel across the street?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And I think that was the only question I had. I'll leave my rest for the report. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, any other members of council? Okay, I have no questions at this point, so we're going to go then to the agent, and he's in the waiting room, or here?
He is, Your Worship. I'm moving now.
Is that Eric Potts?
Yes, Your Worship.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Potts.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me?
You'll have to speak up a little bit louder.
I'll hold my mic a little closer. You hear a little better now?
That's excellent. Thank you.
Perfect. And I'm just waiting for the presentation to go up. Sorry, is the presentation up already? I cannot see it.
No, it's not up yet. Our person is working on it.
No worries.
Okay, it's up now. Can you see it?
I can see it, yep.
Please proceed.
Good evening, Chair, members of the council, and those attending virtually or in person to receive information about the proposed residential infill development. My name is Eric Potts. I'm a junior planner with Cortec Group, working with the applicant owner, Mr. Jeff Davis, who is a local resident and developer in Fort Erie. Mr. Davis's developments typically focus on gentle intensification, providing housing solutions where the community desperately needs it. Our client continues to be adaptable, providing several revisions to better address our comments as seen today. So I would also like to thank Ms. Young for her thorough presentation, and I'll quickly add some details of the project and the requested amendment for this development in the Douglastown Black Creek area. So as sort of stated here, the entire lot area is 2,370 square meters in size. There's a lot frontage of 45.7 meters along Black Creek Road, and then it also extends 51.8 meters along Westbrook Avenue as it's a corner lot. The proposal is for a zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision to create 8 dwelling lots for 1 block of 6 townhouse units and the 2 semi-detached dwelling units. The zoning bylaw amendment proposes that the R1 zone is amended to the RM1 zone. And the purpose of that is to permit the housing type as semi-detached and street townhouse dwellings. There are no longer any site-specific amendments requested, as Samantha alluded to in her presentation. As requested by the town, a 7 by 7 meter daylighting triangle will be dedicated to the town, free of any encumbrances. And the requirement is due to the Black Creek Road being a collector road and Westbrook being a local road. The minimum unit lot frontage is 6.8 meters, which will allow for each lot to provide 3-meter wide driveways on site, access from the public road. And an attached garage will be provided at the end of each driveway. The town requires 1 parking space per residential dwelling unit here, and we're really offering 2 between the driveway as well as the garage space. And the proposed lots are at least 200 square meters in the area, which meets the zoning intents. It's an appropriate size to accommodate a townhouse semi-dwelling, and dwellings will range from 977 square feet to 1275 square feet in ground floor area. The proposed dwellings are 2 stories in height, not 3 stories in height, with pitched roofs, not a flat roof, to blend with the neighborhood character. The subject lands are surrounded by residential uses, mainly R1 uses, but as pointed out, across the street on Black Creek Road is that land designated for future medium density residential with a mix of housing types. We can move to the next slide. And so this slide here, it shows the conceptual site plan as it currently stands with the location of the dwellings in the context of the site. The proposed dwellings are entirely compliant with the RM1 zone now. The semi-detached units, as stated by Ms. Young earlier, they offer 8-meter front yard setbacks to align with the 8-meter setbacks of the adjacent dwellings on Westbrook Avenue. And the townhouse units have a 6-meter setback now, which is similar to the 7-meter setbacks along Black Creek Road. The daylighting triangle was increased from what it previously was to meet the comments provided by town engineering staff. And furthermore, to reduce the impacts to the neighboring properties in the public realm, we've provided enough room on the side yard for the minimum planting strip requirements, which was not the case before. And with doing that, there's some screening that can be provided from adjacent dwellings as well as from the public realm for the townhouses. And we understand that the town intends to eventually provide a sidewalk within the 5-meter clearance from the front lot line to the street, and that we would have to be providing cash in lieu at this time for that. On to the next slide. So this is a look just quickly at the requested amendments for the townhouses. As we've stated, they entirely align now with the RM1 zone, which we are proposing to rezone to. The housing type as a townhouse is medium density residential use. That can be provided within a low density area based on a zoning bylaw amendment as we're proposing here. Townhouses are a bit of a slight departure from the existing housing type, with the majority of the stock on those streets being R1, the single detached dwellings, but we offer a unit size that's pretty similar to what exists in the neighborhood in comparison, I guess. The interior townhouse units are proposed with a ground floor area of 1275 square feet, while the exterior ones are a little smaller. But those interior units now, they're within 100 square feet of what exists in the single detached along Black Creek Road on that same block face. The lot area for each unit is considered appropriate for the RM1 zoning. The unit size still allows for the minimum landscaped area as well as the maximum lot coverage requirements to be met. And upon public feedback, those dwelling lots for the townhouses were made longer from what was shown at the open house. And in doing so, we were able to accommodate the planting strip to better align with the RM1 zoning. While it's not shown on that drawing, a garage is delineated at the end of each driveway. They're about 3 by 6, so single car garage. And the landscaping strip, as mentioned before, it's able to screen the townhouse development from Westbrook Avenue at the north, as well as from the similar housing types to the south on Black Creek Road. And so we believe that it's able to fit with the character of the neighborhood even better. The next slide. So just looking at the amendments for the semi-detached dwellings, as Ms. Young stated, it defers to the R3 zone when you look at the RM1 zoning for semi-detached dwellings. This slide identifies the current zoning regulations and how we comply with each of them. The housing type as a semi-detached is a low-density use under the official plan in the secondary plan area, but it's not permitted in the current R1 zoning, though the secondary plan area allows for us to convert it through a zoning bylaw amendment. So the secondary plan area also promotes semi-detached dwellings as a preferred housing type for low-density land. Upon public comments about character and yard space, those semi-detached lots were made more narrow, and so they lost some of their yard space. And the dwelling units were set back a similar depth to what exists on Westbrook Avenue. And so through the similar setbacks, as well as the proposed coverage and the semi-detached dwelling units, they intend to blend more with the single detached that exists currently on Westbrook. So like stated before, we have 8-meter setbacks, just like the neighbors. The frontage combined between the two units is about 22.4 meters, which is within half a meter of what exists at the nearest dwellings on Westbrook. And then it's a larger lot. And so just like the other ones on Westbrook, it's less than 25% coverage for that dwelling. And so we believe that the semi-detached dwellings on Westbrook also fit with the neighborhood character. Moving on. So looking at the building height design a little bit, this slide provides an illustration of the townhouse and semi-detached dwellings with cultured stone and brick veneer design, which we believe are consistent with the existing neighborhood. Before there was some drawings going around showing a more modern type, so we've tried to scale it back. The existing neighborhood is a mix of 1 to 2 story dwellings with pitched roofs. And so the proposal aims to provide a 2-story design with pitched roofs to conform with that. And as previously mentioned, each unit will have a garage. The image shown in the bottom left there, that is not our development. That is some inspiration that our developer took. And the idea is to keep this generally the same as we move into the building permit, but the final concept will definitely be assessed and finalized at that time. Moving on. So this slide just aims to address some of the comments that we saw through the public consultation, as well as the comments received from the city, region, and other commenting agencies. So in regards to the zoning requirements and the character, the building design was scaled back from preliminary concepts, as I just showed. This includes a 2-story development with pitched roofs and similar to materials as to what exists in the neighborhood. We changed the layout of the lots to have more satisfactory landscaping strips, providing a development now that's entirely compliant with the RM1 zoning. And in regards to the concerns about drainage, which has come up in the past and will continue to, we forwarded some comments onto our internal engineering team that's working on it. And this is what they said. So they said that the development design will ensure that the runoff of all 8 lots is directed to the municipal ditch at Westbrook Avenue. This includes the drainage of the roofs, driveways, patios, and yards. Any runoff from neighboring properties that passes onto the subject development will be conveyed similarly to that ditch. Residents noted concerns as well about the drainage and specifically the existing ditching. And so while I would generally defer some of those comments towards the municipal staff about their ditching, we would propose some regrading of the Westbrook ditch to be able to better service the development. The development engineering staff provided comments upon their review of the design, and we are willing to make some changes in future submission, that being to change this buried solid wall storm pipe draining the southeast corner area to a perforated pipe to be in line with their policy. And as well, as per development engineering requests, all rainwater leaders will drain to the front, and every unit's sump pump discharge will be released at the front of the house only. I know there were some concerns about the size of those front yards. I think that we should definitely note that the units beside each other have their driveways beside each other. And in doing so, it creates a better image of a bit of a wider front yard. And so generally a front yard area will be between the 2 units that are sharing it. It's about 7.6 meters in width. And so in addition to adapting to the existing comments, we're willing to comply with the requirement of the peer review of the functional servicing report performed by the town's consultant. And then lastly, we refer to the parking, which was raised as a concern. While it's not displayed on the drawing, like I said, we have always had intents for a garage, and so we have a parking space on site as well as a garage within the delineation of that building. And so 2 parking spaces per each unit. We anticipate most of the development parking to be contained within the subject lands. And from our experience, as far as traffic flow, a project of this scale would not be anticipated to create a large impact. There are only 8 units going in here, and actually 7 being added to what currently exists. And that's typically not what we would consider to be having a massive potential impact in regards to vehicular traffic. Moving on. And just quickly referring to planning policy, for every new development proposal, it shall be weighted against the current legislation and be consistent and conform with provincial, regional, and local policies. In this regard, our development is consistent and conforms to policies by providing an opportunity for an infill residential use to assist the town and region to address the housing shortages, contributing to the target of residential density for the town, directing growth towards an area identified for strategic growth, providing a dwelling type that is considered gentle intensification, and providing a mixed range of housing options for the achievement of complete communities, and then efficiently providing site servicing and utilizing existing infrastructure. And on to the last slide. So generally, this slide is just to show the anticipated next steps with our process with our team and addressing any outstanding questions and concerns. So town planning staff will will prepare the recommendation report with the proposed amendments, which will be brought to a future council meeting for deliberation. We anticipate that a peer review of the functional servicing report will be conducted, as has been part of the comments so far, and that will be prior to approval, as requested by the town planning staff to ensure that drainage plans are appropriate. We're willing to be complicit with that, of course. And then following the pending approvals in the 20-day appeal period, we would then move into the building permit application for this, which will be provided for approval at that time and accompanied by detailed architectural design that is appropriate within the neighborhood context. So thank you guys. This completes my presentation, and thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Potts. Do any members of council have any questions? Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Potts. Mr. Potts, can you tell me how units 2, 3, 4, and 5 are going to be able to accommodate a perforated pipe that's going to drain?
Thank you for your comment. I would have to defer that to my engineering team. I would have to, I know that their actual conceptual site plan or site servicing plan that they put in the submission package was before some of these changes happened to the site plan in general. And so per the comments that we've received so far, we would expect revisions, and with the functional servicing report as well, we would imagine that this would be explored further, but I would have to defer that comment to my engineering staff.
Okay.
Councillor Noyes.
Okay, so I guess I'll wait for the report to come back. In regards to sidewalk notification, are sidewalks going to be on this side of the street or the other side of the street?
Sorry, is this question?
Do you know?
Do you know that, Mr. Potts? Which side of the street?
Yeah. That is maybe a question more for Ms. Young. I was under the assumption that they would be happening on the side of our development,
Okay.
and that they would be happening, of course, outside of the what has been shown on our site plan.
Okay, that's my understanding. Can you put the mic a little closer to you when you're speaking, because we're starting to lose you.
Sorry.
So your understanding is it's on the east side, which is in front of your units?
That was my understanding, yes.
Councillor Noyes?
Thank you. And when you're advertising or creating site plans and looking for real estate to sell these, can you make a point of making sure that the purchaser realizes that their driveway is not as long as they think it's going to be, and there's going to be a sidewalk there? It's going to cut into it at the 6 meters?
Through to you, Councillor. From my understanding and from our conversations with Ms. Young, where that sidewalk would be placed would not cut into the driveway that was shown on our site plan drawing, so that's 6 meters. It would be outside of that 6 meters, but yes, we would be willing to make note of And the reference to that is just stating that obviously there is still room for that single car parking on the driveway. But yes, we would be willing to make that known that in future time that would be potentially developed and cut into the driveway.
Thank you, Mr. Potts. I agree that the sidewalk isn't going to go within the 6 meters of the parking lot, but when you have the road or the driveway going right to the existing road, it looks a lot longer. And then when the sidewalk goes in, the owners are quite surprised that they've lost about 10 feet of what they thought was theirs and they've been using for parking. So you can assure us that the potential buyers will be made aware of this?
He has already, Councillor Noyes, and I think Mr. Heikoop had an excellent suggestion last time that when they do the drawings and the plans, our staff should ensure that the sidewalk is shown on those plans, even if it's outside of the envelope where the development will take place.
Yes, I agree. That's a good idea. I think it was one of my questions. Can they be notified? Mr. Pont, you said that you thought that because the townhouses that are connected, that because the driveways are connected on one side and the green grass is connected on the other side, that should be sufficient let's say grass, to accommodate the drainage from the downspout and for the sump pump. And these are the ones that, by the way, you're not going to be able to put a perforated pipe to, that I can see there's no room for it. Are you confident that drainage, that small little green space is going to be enough to accommodate all the drainage?
Through to you, Councillor, I do not believe that I used the wording sufficient. I just made note of the fact that when you're considering the size of the front yard, we cannot just consider in regards to the drainage, that we cannot just consider that it's a 3.8 meter wide front yard because there's one beside it and that would affect how it would drain. I'm not willing to comment on the sufficiency. That's something that my engineering staff would have to comment on. But I just thought that was worth making note of in terms of your conversation earlier.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other members of council? Then thank you very much, Mr. Potts. We're going to go to anyone who wishes to also speak in support of the application other than the proponent. And I don't see anyone here. Mr. Patton, is there anyone else in the digital waiting room? Okay. So then anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the application or to address council with respect to the matter. So I'm going to start with you, ma'am, and then I'll go to Mr. Hunter. And as you know, we need your name and address for the record.
Jean Hall, 2895 Westbrook Avenue. And this property is 2 doors down from me. The drainage issue is the greatest thing. One thing people are forgetting, they're looking at the properties on Westbrook and the properties on Black Creek. If you look at the overview, there are 11 units behind the houses on Westbrook that started the problem with the drainage. That was approved. They put 11 units on, I don't know how big the property is, but if you look at that picture that I just showed you, or you showed me, and you've got but there's 11 units that were put into a property that somebody attached a front property that faced on River Trail and joined it, and they put 11 units in behind us. I've been on this property for 33 years. We never had a problem with drainage until those 11 houses went in. And they're in. We can't do anything about it other than walk through waters, 3 inches deep in our backyards now. I have pictures, actually my husband's sick. I'm trying to get him to send me some photos of the drainage ditches in front of our properties full of water because it's got nowhere else to go. After it hits our backyards and floods everything out, they've got 11 units on a lot more land than that corner unit. They've got the multi across the street that they can put in. Why do they have to put in 8 units on a corner double lot. Why not just couple of semi-detaches? They're just not going to make as much money, but they'll make better money, and the same thing will happen with these. They'll end up as rentals, the same as the majority of those 11 properties that were supposed to be sold. The majority of them are rentals because nobody will buy them. And now with the pricing market, nobody can afford to buy them. And all it's just doing is adding more. Our neighbor's property has lost probably 40 feet that's underwater because that corner property is not being maintained like it was when the people were living there. They've lost, it's all underwater. You can't even mow it back there. And the poor people that live beside that property, they're getting flooded out. My neighbors are getting flooded out from that corner property as well as the back of us. So I'm totally against this. Something's got to be done better than 8 units on this tiny property when they can get okayed for 11 on a much huge piece of property than this is. It's just ridiculous. All just for the dollar. The other thing is the roads in that area are not maintained. I've been there 33 years. There has never been anything asphalted. Patched, yes. And when they patch it, the last patch they had to fix because they had to dig up. We had a big pothole, and we called and complained about it. And it wasn't until somebody from the town went driving through and their head hit the top of their truck that it got fixed the first time. It's back again, and I've called a couple of times about it. It's still there. It's covering almost 2/3 of the road, and it's still there. The property in there isn't maintained up to the standards. The park's cut weekly, but the roads getting into it aren't very good. Baker just got paved. All the new subdivisions that are in are all paved. And like I said, we've never seen pavement. All we've ever seen is patching in 33 years. And now they want to put all of this high-density housing in this little corner. I'm not even happy about it being on the other side of Black Creek. I can accept that. But at this corner, no. It's just going to make it totally unlivable, my backyard. And not just mine, everybody else's. Sorry, that's about...
You mentioned that one of your neighbors is 40 feet underwater, about 40 feet of the lot is underwater. Is that the one at 2901?
2991, yeah.
Okay.
At the back corner from the back of their lot. Like I said, the people that were there maintained that. They had people come in to take care of that lot prior to this. The builder, that was just cut and not well when those pictures were taken by the town that showed the property. Before that, the grass was probably a foot high, and that was the first time it's been cut, other than when the neighbors cut some of it.
Do any members of council have any questions of, I'm sorry, your last name again, ma'am?
Hall.
P-A-U-L?
Hall, down the hall.
Down the hall. Members of council? Thank you very much, Ms. Hall.
Okay.
Mr. Hunter? Good evening.
Good evening. Greg Hunter, 3735 Sussex Lane. I'm opposed to this development because the third access road issue to Douglastown has not been resolved yet. I believe that access and egress to a neighborhood are a fundamental issue, particularly for emergency services, and adding more residents to a neighborhood which has an access and egress issue only makes the problem worse. There were previous councils which approved developments, and this council also approved a development without resolving the third access issue. And just to refresh your memory, I think it was in December of last year, there was a report from staff which identified a number of options for adding a third access road into Douglastown. No solution was agreed upon. There's approximately 1,000 residents in Douglastown which currently only have 2 roads in or out of our neighborhood. And within probably about the next 6 weeks, we're going to be down to 1 road in or out for a period of at least 8 months. And then next summer, when they replace a culvert on Black Creek Road, we'll be in the same situation again for probably 6 weeks. And like I said, adding more development to a neighborhood which already has an access and egress issue is not good planning. It's just waiting for a bigger problem to happen. Right now, all of these residents for the next 8 months are going to have to go through one intersection. If we have any emergency in that intersection, none of those residents or emergency services will be able to reach those neighbors. So with this proposed development, we're going to have construction vehicles. We also have another 17 homes currently being built in a previously approved development. There's going to be a lot of activity there, all going down one road, going through one intersection. Over the past 8 months, I've sent a number of emails trying to get an update on the status of this third road access, and I haven't gotten any acknowledgement, no response, nothing but crickets. So I'm just asking you to, if anyone, either staff or council, has an update on the status of the third access road, if you could please let us, give us an update tonight. And if you don't have a solution identified, please defer the approval of this development until that third access issue is resolved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hunter. And just to go to your final comment, yes, in terms of the third access, that is something that I've had communication with the Associate Minister of Transportation on. This is, dealing with the Ministry of Transportation, as you know, is challenging at best. So we're hoping to get a meeting with the Minister of Transportation herself to deal with this. It's critical that we come up with a solution. There are a number. You had presented one solution before. That may be what will be the end result, but there are a couple of others that I'd like to try to push forward. So I'm not meaning to ignore you. I know you sent me an email a couple of days ago. It's just I wasn't able to get back to you on that, and there wasn't really much to report other than that. But I commit to you that I will stay in touch with you. If you send me an email and I don't respond immediately, feel free to send another one to remind me that you're there. Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and I'm actually glad you raised that issue because I was going to mention similar something to Greg, that there's been like some communication working that we're trying to work through this. I appreciate you bringing this up and raising this issue because we did have a lot of discussion about this previously, moving back and forth, and I think we've had some positive discussion. We're not there yet, but I think we've made more progress than even I thought we were going to make. So I'm very happy about that. But I just wanted to get some clarification. So if we did actually get some sort of solution or have an idea of where this is moving forward, is that your primary concern? You'd be more satisfied with this going through as long as we had an idea of where we were going with the third access and how that was going to fit as part of this?
In my mind, that would eliminate the main issue from a larger neighborhood perspective. With regard to drainage, I mean, I have no opinion. Does it really fit the style of the neighborhood? I would say no, because currently the entire neighborhood is single-family detached, and you're adding, we've seen this many times in these council meetings where there's no parking. When the snow comes, where do the cars go? How do you get your lawnmower into the backyard when you can't even, you know what I mean? It's all the same stuff. So, but the access is the main issue. And I'm happy to hear that there appear to be discussions going on behind the scenes, and hopefully this council won't defer the solution. Hopefully, before the term of this council ends, you'll identify where that third access road is going to go.
And it's the plan.
Hopefully.
And I appreciate that. And thank you very much for bringing this to our attention this evening, because this is something that, it's in the back of our mind. It's something we're continually working with, but it's always good to have you come out and give us a reminder, because it is definitely something we need to resolve. Thank you, Greg, for coming out tonight and it was good seeing you.
Members of council. Mr. Hunter, in the past, you've also expressed concerns about sewage capacity.
Yes.
You know that we've got a consultant that is doing a peer review of the servicing report that was provided by the consultant. I presume you still have some concerns?
Is that with regard to the proposed development on Town Line?
Town Line Road in Netherby. Yeah, so any area where we've got sewage capacity issues, we have a consultant that GM2 plan, or whatever it's called, looks at that. Mr. Walsh, do you know if or even Mr. Hurlovich, is this one of the developments that would be subject to a peer review?
Your worship, the...
Of the functional service report?
Yes, your worship, they would be required to provide a functional servicing report. I can't say whether GM Blue Plan is looking at this Douglastown area as part of their overall review, but they are looking at our servicing master plan, so it may include this. I'm sorry, I can't confirm.
I guess just to put it on your radar, if that's a concern that you've got, maybe you could reiterate and help us out again. I know you've provided us with material in the past about capacity, and yeah, there is a lot of growth that's taking place, and we're all concerned about that.
Yes, I was going to follow up with an email and that's been in the works.
Yeah, and that has been moving forward. There's been work that's being done on that, and the last infrastructure services subcommittee meeting we had, there was some discussion about that. So it's not finalized, but we'll try to get some information out to you. Okay, thank you. Anyone else who wishes to address council with respect to this matter? Mr. Patton, is there anyone, is it still just Mr. Potts in the digital waiting room, or is he gone too? It's Mr. Potts? Okay. Madam Clerk, have we received any late correspondence with respect to this matter other than what's in our report?
Yes, Mayor Redekop. Rachel Ollie of 3446 Black Creek Road submitted comments in opposition regarding the character of the proposal, displacement of groundwater drainage, and as well as parking concerns.
Okay. I'm sorry, ma'am, you wanted to come forward? Yes, you may. I haven't closed the meeting yet, so. No, that's fine. We just need, exactly, we just need your name and address.
My name's Karen Elberson.
I live at 3430 Black Creek Road, three lots down from the proposed building. My concern is not just for my neighborhood, it's for every neighborhood. This is setting a precedent for future builders coming to our town. If you can take a double lot and put 8 units on it, this is going to be an ongoing problem. Would that mean that if I have a big lot, if I come up with a proposal to put a driveway down the side of my road, I can put a house behind mine? You know, this is setting a precedent in the area where we live. Not only here, but I see it going on in other parts of Fort Erie. Stevensville, Crystal Beach, all these townhouses going in amongst $1 million homes. Resale or safety. And now I didn't even understand that there was, we need a third entrance into our community. And now we got that, we've got 2 subdivisions already built and houses being sold. Another one across from me, and there's no third entrance. I didn't even know that was an issue. Now I'm even more upset about this building happening because of the parking. There's already people parking on the street, and they have a double car garage. They have a double laneway driveway. And I appreciate the other speakers, what they've said. The gentleman that said,
I've never parked in my garage. Hardly anybody parks in their garage, you know, so I see that being a big issue with the snow, the parking, and this third entrance. I just can't believe. I'm very disappointed. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Albertson. Any questions by members of council? Thank you very much. Last call, yes, please come forward, sir. Good evening, we need your name and address for the record.
William Carver, 3414 Black Creek Road, just lived down the street from the proposed development. Promised myself I wouldn't say anything tonight, but I have to support my neighbors, and thank you for coming out and doing the site visit. I appreciate that. I've expressed my concerns to Ms. Young earlier in our informal meeting. I guess what I'm really looking here is we're all for development. I think you can sense in our voices that we're passionate about our community, and I sense with the feedback that you're all giving us that you're passionate about the development of our community as well. The concerns we have, and again, we're echoing everyone, I love Councilperson Noyes' comment about putting 10 pounds of sugar in a 5-pound bag. I thought that was kind of appropriate for this particular location. I'm going to echo Mr. White's comments about the parking. I love the fact that we've got, 8 units, two cars per unit, that's 16 cars, of which historically the garages are too small. They fit a couple garbage cans and a lawnmower. You're not going to put an SUV in. Certainly, I'm concerned about the parking, the drainage. I'm repeating myself. The issue is in Black Creek is that it was historically, I believe it was originally founded in the late 30s and early 40s. It was farmland. It never did have proper drainage. We don't have road conditions. The drainage ditches on Black Creek represent a hazard to local travel. If you get too far off the main thoroughfare, you're into a soft shoulder and into the ditch. This proposed location, it's not going to provide for sidewalks. I'm getting up there in age, and I'm likely never going to see sidewalks at this particular part of Black Creek because of the proposed location across the street. Who knows when that will actually be prepared. So we have no curbs, we have no sidewalks. Drainage is historically an issue, and as I believe it's Mrs. Hall, as in Hall down the street, thank you very much. I think she hit the nail right on the head. There was a development which I shared with Ms. Young that comes in off of Black Creek, actually River Trail. It's 11 new units. It did cause a problem with the drainage of all the Westbrook people. That historically was a natural drainage that went down onto River Trail and then filtered in. And there's an actual drainage culvert across River Trail into Black Creek. That was interfered with. What's happening is the water flow is now backing up into the Westbrook lots. And she's not exaggerating when she says there's 40 feet of water that's flowing into it. The Westbrook ditches along the road are not sufficient to handle the water flow now. And I appreciate that they're going to drive the water off the front of the buildings onto the ditch out in Black Creek. But where I come from, there's a back of the house as well. And I don't see where that water is going to go to the front of the house. I'm not a smart guy, I'm not an engineer, but probably not going to go to the front of the house. So I think what I'm trying to emphasize here is a plea to consider maybe downsizing the number of units on that location. The houses, since we've moved into Black Creek a number of years ago, have probably tripled in price. And I appreciate that Mr. Davis wants to provide a void in our community, but there's no void in Black Creek. There's no shortage of homes in Black Creek. There will be more homes coming in Black Creek. We don't have transit in Black Creek, so there'll be more cars, more children on the street. Certainly creates a potential for more risk. And we all are adverse to risk. We don't want to see our children at risk. So having said that, I think what I'm trying to emphasize here tonight is a plea for reconsidering what is being presented to you all. I don't think we need 8 units. Again, I'm not an economist. I'm not an engineer. I am a concerned, passionate resident of Black Creek. So, as I tear up here, is an emotional stance here as I'm trying to get you all to look at this. I'd ask you to consider maybe reducing the number of units. And as I said, from a cost perspective, I'm looking at a small home that's going for $750 on the outside. I'm looking for an upscale home that's going for $1.4. Interest rates are high, payments are high, no one gives a rat's behind anymore. It's like, I want to live there, I'm going to move there. So how about we put 4 units on that location, charge 1.4, and I think everybody's happy. We don't need 8 units there. But thank you very much for the analogy that we're going to put 10 pounds of sugar into 5. I thought that was very appropriate. And I'd like to thank you all for letting me rant. This has been good, therapeutic, appreciate it for this. It's all gone well. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Carver. Before you go, Councillor Noyes is going to let you know that she's not the originator of that saying. That's a former councillor, Councillor Luberts. I take it that you're not familiar with on-demand transit that serves all of Fort Erie and
I do, but none of us have any phones out in Black Creek. You know, we're in a very rural community. The roads are in poor shape, and you know.
All right, Councillor Noyes, you can deal with.
You can deal with Carver. Okay.
Actually, one of my questions was, are you aware of the transit, the on-demand transit?
We are.
Well,
okay, so look, this is a meeting where Mr. Carver now is at the podium. He's the one that's subject to any questions by members of council. The rest of you have either had an opportunity or you will have an opportunity if you wish. Councillor Noyes.
thank you, Mr. William. Thank you for your passionate presentation. I do realize that this is a big change for this particular area, and I don't necessarily agree with it. Do you have any drainage problems where you live?
Well, actually, I ignore them now, because what's happening when those 11 units were developed back there, I had the town come several times. They had to develop or regrade it, and I love it. They grade it to the site plan. Then they put down the topsoil, and then they put down 2 inches of sod so that when it's all said and done, they're above the site plan requirement. But they met the site plan requirement when it was initially graded. So we ignore it now. My neighbor next door, he just puts up with it because, and it's just not disrespectful, it's just the fact that how many times can you grade it to get it right? They graded it twice, still didn't get it right, and so we just ignore it. It's a fact of life. It's not going to go away. The 11 houses are there. Life is good. So what are we going to do? My neighbor, the house is for sale now. I don't know what address that is, but his yard through the month of July and August with all the rain was flooded. He couldn't cut his backyard. And it's because the development behind them, they've put in nice landscape. It's really well done. Don't get me wrong, but it's nice landscape, but it comes right up to his lot, and his house was built in the 80s. His yard is lower, so the water sits there. There's no escape. It's good breeding ground for mosquitoes. Karen's house is the same example. She's backs onto the subdivision, and everybody guarantees and everybody assures you that it's going to be fine, but she can't cut her yard during the rainy months either because, again, of the landscaping. It's not a criticism, and I want to emphasize that. It's just that we need more help than what I think we're getting. And once it's approved and once the cement's in the ground, there's no fixing it. There's no turning back. So our plea is for you all to look at this and say, yeah, I get what they're saying. What can we do to minimize the impact in the surrounding neighborhood? And that's what we're all here for, not to criticize. We want development. We want to see the tax base grow. I mean, more taxes that come into this community, it's better for all of us. We get better roads, we get better education. The idea is not to impact the neighbors that are there now. And that's what we're having. This is going to impact us all. I mean, the neighbors that are across Westbrook, they are going to have a problem with the parking. I guarantee it. And we can all say, don't worry about it. We'll put them in the driveway, we'll put them in the garage. That is going to be nonsense. Mr. Hunter made a very valid point. We're going to have one entrance. We have problems with that one entrance now. We have parking that's on one side, no parking on the other. I know that we're a bilingual country, but nobody reads the parking sign. And we cannot have a bylaw officer working 24/7 in that community. So there's huge issues. It's a risk to all of us, and it may sound small, but it's not. It's not. And if you're living in another part of the community, good for you. Unfortunately, we're all living here. And it's a plea to give further consideration to the issues that have been brought to everyone's attention, and if we can just get some help.
Mr. Noyes?
Nothing further, but thank you for your...
Okay, thank you all.
Member of Council, thank you very much, sir.
Appreciate your time.
Is there anyone else that wishes to address council? Mr. Patton, we're still with no one else in the digital waiting room except Mr. Potts?
Just double check your worship. It's just Mr. Potts' worship.
Okay, I'm going to declare this public meeting closed. And would someone like to put the report, PDS 60-something, 65? My notes have got it all covered. PDS 65, 2023. Councillor Lewis, that report's on the floor for questions or comments. Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I know I got some applause from residents earlier when I made comments, and unfortunately I don't think that that's going to happen this time. It's very rare that we have an application for a rezoning come forward to us that have no deviations requested from the zoning. This completely complies with RM1 zoning. And the secondary plan in this neighborhood permits a change from low density to medium density use if a zoning application is made, which is being made now. I look back to the development we had on Adelaide Street in Ward 2, and it was a similar contentious issue. Very wide lots in that neighborhood, 80 foot, some are even wider. They get a little narrower as you get down towards the lake, but up towards Dominion, they're very wide. And I look back at that development, and they transitioned from Dominion Road to Adelaide by putting the townhouses near Dominion and 2 singles onto Adelaide as a buffer. Narrower, but they still provided a transition. I look at this plan, something similar is proposed. They're putting the townhouses on the main road, and then they're transitioning with a semi with a very large backyard on Westbrook. I understand the frustration and the challenge that every resident in this community has with the need to build housing, the cost of land, the need to put more units onto smaller pieces of land to try and make a go of it. But I'm going to be perfectly frank. My sister is 30 years old. She just got married. She and her husband are expecting their first child. She's never going to be able to afford a house, at least with the way things are now. So I cannot in good conscience look at a development that would sell a house for, say, $700,000 and then say, well, you know what, let's just put up some $1.4 million houses. I just can't do that. I understand the frustration and the amount of residents that are moving to this region and the challenges we face. There are far worse things that we could do on this piece of property than what's being proposed right now. And I think to some of the proposals that we've seen happen on Dominion Road, where they get into condominium townhouses with internal roads, a parcel like this, they could double the number of units. And the first thing I remember the consultant saying is that they wanted to do gentle intensification. And when I look at something like this to me is an example of what gentle intensification is. It's meets all of the zoning requirements. It meets every, requirement under the secondary plan to switch from low density to medium density, and it even transitions with some of the medium and more intense low density that's being put across the street. Obviously, we've had comments tonight about the drainage issues. Councillor Noyes raised some very valid concerns. If everything is discharging to the front of the yard, we're going to have the engineering look at that, put that into a report so that we can be satisfied that this isn't going to make the situation even worse for the residents that they've expressed here. But this puts us in a real tough situation when we have when we constantly ask developers, why aren't you meeting our requirements? Why aren't you looking at our bylaw? And why aren't you meeting our setbacks? Why are you trying to squeeze something in and change this setback? Sometimes we have a dozen different requests to deviate from the zoning bylaw to go site specific. This one does not have any at all. And I completely sympathize with where the residents are coming from. But this one, when I see an example of gentle intensification, I think this meets those check boxes. We have to address the concerns with drainage, but frankly, if every application met every single checkbox and there was no gray and it was all green, my job would be a lot easier. And that's just a simple fact of the matter. I understand the residents in Black Creek may not appreciate those comments, but when I look at some of the things we've done elsewhere in town, and I look at the examples we've done for gentle intensification in similar type of neighborhoods, I think this is fair. So I'm going to be supporting the information report tonight. I look forward to seeing the recommendation report to clarify some of those concerns related to drainage. That's going to be an important issue, but we'll move forward. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Councillor Noyes.
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. It is zoned right now R1, and I do agree with Councillor Dubanow that if you rezone it RM1, it meets all the requirements, but it does not meet the R1 current zoning requirements. The secondary plan says, yes, you can. It doesn't mean you have to make those changes. I'm very concerned about the drainage problems that are currently existing now in Westwood, and that will definitely come up for a future discussion in regards to we need to do something about it. They're absolutely right that I think they're condominiums that were put on the corner there, the private road type thing, and that's what caused the problem. And I can remember us promising the residents it would not cause a problem, that the Drainage Act that we had worked out, the drainage plan was all worked out, and there'd be no negative results, and we see what's happening. I guess my question is, on page 10 of 13, it says, a soils investigation report is recommended to be prepared and certified by a qualified geotechnical engineer consultant as a condition of the draft plan approval. Why is that in there? Why is that in this report? Other than the obvious, you want a report. Is that something?
Ms. Young, can you respond to that? Maybe you can repeat that, Councillor Noyes.
Yes, on page 10 of 13, right at the top, it talks about a soils investigation report.
Oh, yes, through your mayor to Councillor Noyes, this is a standard comment that we provide from town staff to the applicant. It is always recommended to do this soils investigation report to ensure that the future development would not be impacted in any negative way. I'm just trying to think a little bit more thoroughly to provide a better answer here. Let me refer, if you don't mind waiting a little bit, I'm just going to refer to town staff's comments to provide a little bit more detail. So the intent of the report is to provide recommendation and any other foreseeable issues, given the existing and historical characteristics of the soils in the area. So this will include clay, shallow bedrock and other types of characteristics, and would additionally comment on the foundations, compact requirements, drainage schemes, and effects, if any, to the proposed services for the lot. So typically, these reports would also provide a chemical component to be considered too. So the intent is to receive as much information as possible before approving a development.
Thank you for that explanation. My next question, I guess, to whoever, is, okay, there's a big comments about drainage and that there's going to be another study and we're going to get some more engineering, further design and review and consideration are required. But again, you're having all these townhouses back to back, or side by side, I guess. And one of the recommendations is for a perforated pipe to go from the back to the front to get to the ditch. Well, you're not going to get there when there's no side yard. There's no place to put a perforated pipe. You're not going to put it through your living room or through your basement. You're not going to do that. And although there's a front yard there, it's very, very small. And both the sump pump and the downspouts are all going to lead to that small little patch of grass in the front. I do know that there's a great big ditch there, but this road is also going to be developed, I think, to urban standards, if I'm not mistaken, if the development on the other side of the street happens. And I'm just wondering, when that happens, will there be more consideration for stormwater management with that? Would that improve the drainage? Or would it make it worse than the open ditches that we have now?
Okay, so there's a number of questions which I'll direct to Mr. Waltz. The first has to do with upgrades to Black Creek Road, and the second is whether there would be a storm water system put in at that time underground.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Black Creek Road is in our development charges study. The timing, as with Thunder Bay Road and another road that I can't think of off the top of my head right now, is that we typically wait for the subdivision, West Main and Ott, as you're familiar. We typically wait for the subdivisions to get very close to build out in the areas so that we're not beating up new roads with construction traffic. So Black Creek is slated for an urban standard, stormwater pipes, et cetera, but not for a number of years.
Thank you for that explanation. And again, I think my biggest concern here is drainage. And if we don't fix that, the current drainage problems, we're just going to add to the drainage problems. Or else we're going to be getting calls from someone who says, my sump pump never shuts off. Or the people in lots, the two lots behind one on that face on Westbrook, are basically going to be taking the water from the townhouses that back onto them. So I think I do know there's more reports coming and there's more investigation, but that's a huge concern.
Thank you. Any other members of council? Councillor Christensen.
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. I want to support what you've been saying. I've been sitting here listening to, and I'm thinking sort of bigger picture now. We've listened to two public meetings tonight in both cases, and in particular this case, and I've heard other presentations about the Black Creek area with respect to drainage. I know it's the situation in other parts of town. And as we move forward, I can't emphasize more the responsibility I think that we have to look at that bigger picture and the cumulative effect. I support infill. I think I've said to people that other cities in this province would look very different if people had actually started infill 50 years ago and done it properly. But I am also very concerned that infill can also be an incremental pressure that can distort the impact. And I think raising the question of the future of Black Creek Road, and as well as other roads where there's
going to be an increasing need for urbanization. We as a council and any future councils really have to look at that seriously in order to ensure the integrity of the developments we do approve. Thank you.
Ms. Young, you may sit down, sorry. Okay. Any other members of council? So, Mr. Walsh, the report does make reference to construction of sidewalks on the east side of Black Creek Road. From what you're saying, though, the timing of that wouldn't be until Black Creek Road is reconstructed.
That's correct.
And that could be
Yeah.
many, many years from now. And so I guess my next question would be, and we've run into this before, we take money from a developer for a sidewalk based on today's prices, and as we all know, over the past couple of years alone, the cost of construction has ballooned anywhere from 33 to 50%. Any plan for us to be able to protect ourselves in that regard?
Mr. Mayor, I think that that would be better directed to Mr. Jansen and his investment shenanigans.
Nice pass. If there's going to be a lengthy horizon between today and when this development might proceed and the larger development across the road, does it make any sense to require the sidewalk to be constructed? I mean, we could be talking 10 years or more.
We likely could, Mr. Mayor, 10 years. I'm loath to say build a sidewalk now, though. There are many things that can change. Typically, if I look at Thunder Bay Road, the elevations will change substantially when it's urbanized in the near future. I think there's just too many questions to have a sidewalk built right now. As much as I would like a sidewalk, and I'm a big proponent of active transportation, I don't think it's a good spend for the town's money or a developer's money.
Okay, I guess that's something we need to take under advisement. But I did want to, Mr. Hurlovich, if you wouldn't mind, I just want to get across an understanding here of the predicament that the council is faced with in view of provincial policies. The first and foremost being Bill 23. During the presentation made by Ms. Young, we did have a little timeline that showed, when the application was made, when it was considered complete, and then a period of time within which to process this. Can you comment on that? Because that is the first trigger that the council and staff are put under by Bill 23. So what are the timelines for this type of application?
I might have to defer that to Ms. Young. It does vary whether or not it's a site plan, a subdivision, or rezoning.
Okay. If you wouldn't mind coming back up, Ms. Young. I just want the public to be aware of the fact that we have limited time within which to process these things. So what were the timelines?
Yes, so through your mayor, sorry. So today, with this application, there is a 90-day timeline. And today, I believe we are at day 54 or 56. It was included in my presentation, which is somewhere in my pile of papers, but we are in the 50s of days. And then at the recommendation stage, we would be looking at about 75 days into the 90-day timeline. But that would be if the recommendation report is coming back at the October 23rd meeting. If this is dependent if staff is able to provide the information for the recommendation report as well. So if there requires additional time to work on that recommendation report, there's a possibility that these reports will be pushed back to the next council meeting, which would be in November at that point, and that would come up to 98 days for the next one.
And what's the significance of that?
If a decision is not made at the recommendation, the applicant would be subject to a 50% refund, or there would be a refunding cost.
So just so I've got this straight, it doesn't matter how many applications for planning approvals are made to the municipality, the staff has to process each and every one within a given time frame, because the provincial government has directed that. And if the staff isn't able, or the council fails to make a decision within the appropriate time frame, a developer is entitled to half their application fees back?
Yes, partially, yes, depending on how, there is a structure on the timeline. So if it's pushed back past a certain number of days, then it would be a full refund, and it really depends on that timeline there, but yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to go back to Mr. Hurlovich. In terms of Bill 23, this is part of the provincial government's agenda, we've heard through the last public meeting that there's such a thing as accessory units that can be put into an existing house or into a newly constructed house. What's the situation with that, if you wouldn't mind?
So so someone would apply, they could get a building permit, so you could add an additional dwelling unit into an existing detached dwelling. So there would be 2 dwelling units there, and then they could put a 3rd dwelling unit in a detached building on the same lot.
Depending on the zoning.
As long as it permits a single detached, semi-detached, or what the province calls a row house, a townhouse dwelling.
So it's possible, just so I got this clear, it's possible that every single family dwelling in a residential zone could end up with 3 total units as opposed to 1 housing unit.
That's correct. So let's take for instance, this property could probably support under the current zoning 3 lots. And so those 3 lots could each have 3 units. That could equate to 9 units.
Which is 1 more than what's being proposed, although some of these units could qualify for accessory units.
That's true.
Because the last public meeting we had, there was a specific request made by the developer to have accessory units in each of those townhouses. Is that correct?
That's correct. The reason he was making a point of that was that he wanted permission to have tandem parking, which the zoning bylaw doesn't currently allow.
Right. And what we've been talking about, this is all provincial legislation and direction to all municipalities across the province.
That's correct.
Okay.
Build more houses faster, that's the province's motto.
More houses faster, right. Okay, I have no other questions. Any other questions by members of council? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you, Mayor Redekop. I noticed that there's no attachment for conditions on this report at this point. I'm sure there'll be one coming. And I'm just wondering, is there any chance of making one of the conditions that the back patio, which we all know is going to go there, everyone's going to have a back patio, be considered permeable, so it's not like a solid concrete?
Mr. Hurlovich, can you
Is that
comment on
possible?
I suppose council could ask for that when the recommendation report comes back. I'm not sure whether or not that's a reasonable request. Councillor Noyes already pointed out, Your Worship, that there is a condition that requires a hydrogeological study. That's going to identify what the ground conditions are, what they could support, what the permeation is for those ground conditions. I suppose if the councillor feels strongly enough about that, however, yeah, I don't know whether we could hold somebody to that.
Councillor Noyes?
Fair enough. I'm just putting it out there to kind of think about better ways of maintaining the drainage issues here.
Right, that could be a discussion that Ms. Young can have with the developer.
And just a comment too, I think this particular piece of property would be better suited to semis as opposed to townhouses on Black Creek Road. I think it would solve some of the problems that you're going to have with drainage. And my guess is that we're talking about Willoughby clay, which is probably going to be what the majority of the soil is.
Well,
Which is,
we won't have to guess because there'll be a geological study.
I'm just taking bets. No.
Okay, anything further, Councillor Noyes? Mr. Hurlovich, when we dealt with the Spring Creek Estates, there was some provision relative to a third point of access. And I think it was one of the conditions of approval, there's a time frame within which, is that something that we could consider with respect to this development in terms of a condition?
I'm going to say that that wouldn't really work. The reason that it was applied to the Spring Creek Estates was that they have access to Netherby Road, and the idea was that the third access would be provided through Spring Creek to Netherby Road. This property doesn't really abut that and wouldn't be able to accommodate that kind of a third access.
I'm just thinking in terms of the, excuse me, the additional housing units and the additional population, additional traffic. It's the same issue. We're concerned about people being able to get in and out of this development safely when there's only currently 2 points of access and egress. And then finally, this particular application is subject to appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal by the developer if the council were to deny it or impose conditions that the developer doesn't like. Is that correct?
Yes, the rezoning would be appealable. The subdivision itself would not be appealable except by the developer.
Okay, and the rezoning, is that also appealable by any member of the public?
Any member of the public who has submitted written comments or has made a verbal comment before the council.
Right, okay, thank you very much. If there are no other questions, I'm going to call the question on this report. All those in favor? It's for information purposes, and we'll eventually be getting a recommendation report. Opposed? That is carried. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and when we come back, we'll go to the consent agenda, and then we'll move from there. Okay, we're back in session, and we're now going to the consent agenda. And would someone like to move that? Are there any reports that anyone would wish removed from the consent agenda? We've got the three, we've got the land, we've got PDS 68, the land committee minutes, and the second quarter financial report. Councillor Lewis, those reports are on the floor for any questions or comments. Councillor Noyes?
Yes, I just wanted to comment on the CAO report, the land matters thing in regards to the tennis club. I think that's some really good thinking there, and I did have a chance to talk to Mr. Hutton today about some of the details behind that, because it didn't quite explain everything. But I understand that the non-residential rate, they just can't say, okay, it's going to be 1 cent more, you know. Everybody pays 10 if you're a resident, you pay 10 cents, 5 cents more if you're not. That actually is it'll have to be a town will approve the rate, differentiate. And he talked about that it would probably be on a percentage that we do other non-resident rates. So I think that's great. And also he explained the 6 opportunities for the public to use, that they've always had that kind of in there, but they've always exceeded the 6. And they're really trying to encourage the public to go. But I think the onus this time is going to be to make it better known to the public that this is actually happening and existing. And I understand the town's going to be somewhat involved in promoting that also. So I think that's all good stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, and just on that point, the CAO, Mr. Walsh, Mr. Hutton, and I had a good meeting with representatives from the tennis club the other day. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to receiving the agreement that they come up with. Any other questions or comments on the consent agenda? If not, all those in favor of, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Noyes.
On 8.3, the second quarter financial, just a comment, I gotta find it. Just a clarification that it talks about the moratorium was lifted. I don't want anybody to get the wrong opinion. We did lift it, but we then put it, like there's still a limit. It's not.
There's a limit, but the moratorium on the issuance of new permits was lifted.
Yes.
And now it's to the limit that was permitted.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, because it doesn't quite, if someone read that, they would think, oh, the sky's the limit, there's no limit, but there still is a limit. It's just the moratorium was lifted, but there is still a ceiling that's there. I didn't want the public to think that, there was no longer a ceiling to that, that's all.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of the reports and the recommendation in the consent agenda? Opposed? That is carried. That takes us into Planning and Development Services, and I'm going to hand it over to you, Councillor Dubanow.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you very much. Planning and Development Services is in session for the evening. We have no presentations or delegations. However, we do have 2 reports. I'm wondering if Councillor Christensen, would you be willing to take the chair for PDS 66?
Yes.
Thank you.
So are there, so PDS 66-2023 is on the, we need a mover.
I'll move it.
Mayor Redekop. So reports now on the chair for discussion. Councillor Dubanow.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Christensen, Madam Chair. I spoke with the developer earlier today, and he had some questions regarding the holding provision and getting some clarification on the infrastructure concerns. So I don't want to jump the gun here before any other councillors have an opportunity to speak to this, but it is my intent to move that we postpone this to our, I believe we have a meeting on October 16th.
That's correct.
Yeah, so that's my intent, but I'd Madam Chair, if anyone else has any other comments first, I just don't want to cut them off if they wish to speak to this before I move that.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Noyes.
I'm just wanting clarification. I think the reason you want it postponed is because of the sanitary sewer and that basically the condition?
When we get to that, yeah, he needs some clarification, so just the little delay there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other councillors wish to speak? Worship. All right, then,
So then in that case, Madam Chair, I would like to move that we postpone PDS 66 until October 16th, 2023.
so,
It's not debatable, so we have to vote on it.
yeah, okay. All right, then, all in favor? No, okay, unanimous. Okay, so we'll be postponing the report for consideration till October 16th. Okay. Back to you, Councillor Dubanow.
Thank you very much, Councillor Christensen. Thank you very much for that. So that'll move us to our next report on the agenda, PDS 67, 2023. That is the Backyard Hen Pilot Project Initiation Report. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Noyes. That report is now on the floor for any questions or comments from council. Your worship.
Yeah, Chair, I'm not going to support this, and there's a number of reasons why I'm not, but they really boil down to the comments in the report about the need for additional staff to monitor and enforce any pilot project. I presume that it would be the same staff that we have. We're already overwhelmed with development applications in the planning department, the building department in terms of their inspections. I'm not really, having looked at the report later on in the agenda that deals with the 2024 budget, I'm not really wanting to spend more money on hiring more people. And so on that ground alone, I would have difficulty supporting getting into a pilot project right now for something that I know some people want. They want to have chickens in their backyard, and they feel that there's a variety of reasons why, not just the eggs, but also the emotional aspects of it. But there's some problems that arise out of that. And, unless they're free-range chickens, even if you look at the comment in here about the climate change stuff, well, if they're not free-range, they're not really killing any more than the bugs that are in their pen. And so that's kind of a little iffy in my view. In terms of increasing local food security and sustainability, I have to believe that there's a better way to do that without creating the potential for conflict between neighbors. I mean, and I know this is going to be a potential point of conflict simply because I grew up having to work with chickens for 2 years as a teenager. My dad built a barn. We had 300 chickens in cages. It was my job to feed the chickens, water the chickens, collect the eggs, clean the eggs, and then put the eggs in containers. I also had to pluck the chickens. I wasn't the son of a chicken plucker. I was the chicken plucker. And so, they're a particularly, it's not their fault, but they're a filthy type of animal. And so, that in itself and the problems, Councillor Lewis was good enough to circulate a little bit of information about some of the problems. And I know that some of the people that would take advantage of the opportunity to have backyard livestock, chickens, would do a good job at it. But as the information Councillor Lewis put out states, this is a 24-hour-a-day, year-in, year-out operation. Why would anyone want to submit themselves to that and think it's a good idea? A far better idea, if you need food and you need food security, is put in a garden. And you can grow in about a 20 by 25 foot garden all kinds of tomatoes, beans, peppers, squash, zucchini, cucumbers. I've got a patch that's got rhubarb in there, and you can freeze some of those fruits and some of those vegetables. You can make sauces out of them. You can make soups. There's all kinds of things that you can do, and you're not tied to your garden 24/7 all year. So you can enjoy the fruits of it all year, but you're not stuck to it. So to me, the timing is not good, but the whole notion of putting these in a position where we can create more conflict between residents, which means more bylaw enforcement activity, I'm not prepared to support this report. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And just touching on the garden aspect, you don't even need a 20 by 20 plot. We actually had planters in our front driveway one year and grew some tomato and some pepper plants. It's actually, you don't even need a big backyard. Anyone can do it just with a little effort. That was an excellent thing to raise, Your Worship. Councillor Noyes.
Thank you. I do not agree with Mayor Redekop. He never has been in favor of hens, and I can remember when this came back several years ago, I think he put the kibosh on it then too and said nobody was interested when I've had many requests. My ward is more rural, I think, than some of them. We've had many requests over the years for it. I don't see a problem with it. I think that one of the reports is basically saying, let's get some public input. If the mayor's correct, then we'll listen to the public and say, no, it's not such a good idea. But if there's a demand for it and the public indicates there is a demand for it, then I think perhaps we should listen and look at the pilot project. Again, trying to say, well, don't raise chickens, raise corn. I mean, what kind of argument is that? You can raise corn and chickens. One doesn't have to supersede the other. So I just don't get the negatives. I was a farmer's daughter, and I actually did pluck the chickens. And we had chickens all the time. And we liked our chickens, and we ate our chickens, and they weren't carrots, and they were instead of, we also had a garden that we put with the chickens. We made a nice chicken stew. But anyway, I'm being facetious here, is that to say that we're not going to do this because it's going to cause, create, anger or whatever between neighbors. We're talking about rural, where the lots are quite large, or can be quite large. We're talking about strict restrictions on the size of the pen, the number. We're talking 5 chickens. We're not talking a multi-million-dollar chicken farm here. We're talking 5 hens, no roosters. We've had a number of people here that have asked for that, not just in the rural area, but in the urban area. I agree, not in the urban area. But to say we're going to anticipate that the public doesn't want this, I think that's wrong. We've never really taken that position before. I'm going to have to put that in my memory box and say, well, we don't want neighbors to complain, so we won't do things. I don't think that's why we have public input. That's why we gather this, and the amount of work the staff is going to have to do. I think if they take there was a report done umpteen years ago that was done quite well. It came back and forth. There was 3 times. We tried to work out all the bugs, no pun intended, and then it was just squashed at the end there. The mayor's opinion carried the day, but again, it keeps raising its head, and I get requests many times. We had someone here that said that their chickens perhaps were a comfort for them. They use them as service animals, basically, and she found a lot. Granted, I think that's one-off type thing, but people do like their chickens. I don't know if anybody drove down Garrison Road today. This isn't going to help my argument, by the way. I'm driving down Garrison Road. All kinds of chickens, not on Garrison Road, but in one of the houses. There was chickens running around there, and I don't think anybody's ever heard a complaint about that I've heard of. I know that I won't go down that road, and it's not agricultural, and there's chickens running around there, and they're not even in pens, and nobody's complaining. So, again, I think it's worth the try. I think we tried it a few years ago. And we never really did get public input. And I think this time we should be getting public input, and you can still grow your garden and have chickens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. Any other members of council have any comments? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And sitting next to the mayor every meeting, I learn more and more every time. But I think with the chicken story, that explains maybe why you're so good at doing what you're doing. I have never been a chicken plucker, so I have not had that experience to bring.
Chicken plucker.
Always a friend of, right? I do share the same concerns with the mayor with respect to the potential staff costs with respect to this. One of the things that I think we're overlooking here from an agricultural point of view is, and we have to remember, we are talking agricultural use on lands. And one of the things that we haven't talked about tonight is avian influenza that has struck our province and some of the big flock operators in Ontario with respect to that disease. One of the problems with that disease is in the chicken and poultry sector, they know where the chicken farms are. When it comes to backyard flocks, there is no map, there is no list. We track short-term rentals more than we would this one, and that doesn't even have the ability to have a zoonotic disease component brought into the equation. So certainly I think biosecurity is something that is also overlooked with this. But one of the things that I looked at when reading this report the other night was on page 2, it says if council directs the pilot project, it could also be extended into zones in the urban areas. Well, that is something that I am completely and absolutely against. And as such, residential R1 and waterfront residential zones. And when I read that, I thought, so here we are concerned about people that live in residential neighborhoods, the impacts of bad neighbors, whether they're permanent residents, short-term rental operators, owner-occupied, tenant-occupied, whatever the case may be. And here we are considering putting chickens and hens in people's backyards, including the waterfront property where we don't even let people rent out their cottages. I am not supportive of this for the reasons the mayor gave, and certainly with the staff costs associated with it. But bigger than that, we haven't even touched on, and the report doesn't touch on, the disease aspect of backyard chickens and the problems in which the Poultry Council of Ontario has had to deal with in the last year, as well as the Feather Command Center in terms of dealing with avian influenza. And if we don't know where these are, and they have no way to get in touch with operators that have them, this could be contributing to a much larger problem. So those are my only comments on this, and I will also not.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Any other questions or comments from council? Councillor McDermott.
Yeah, I have to agree with the mayor and Councillor Lewis. I'm not a big fan of this at all. I was also raised on a farm, and we had chickens and turkeys. But we also had a farm. So the part that gets me here is trying to bring it into the urban areas. We've had some cases where 3 or 4 times I've had complaints from residents in my ward, people that have had chickens, and basically the same complaint where they would attract rodents to their house and such. And, you know, bylaws had to go in and take care of that. So I'm not a big fan of that. Neighbors will be neighbors. I don't think that there's a big call in my area for this. And any chance that that would happen, if I supported that, I'm sure I'd be called more than a chicken plucker. So, you know, I would rather leave chickens to the people that are, you know, filling the stores with poultry and eggs. I think I'd rather leave it to the professionals rather than, although I do have some friends in Niagara on the Lake that do have farms and do raise chickens. And, you know, but he's on a farm. And so I really can't support that. I don't think that urban areas or rural areas, I don't think we really need to do that. It's not like eggs are one of the things that aren't really all that expensive. And so I'm not seeing what we gain here. But, you know, the mayor's correct with the fact that, you know, this next budget, irrespective of what people think, irrespective of all the different forms of government we've got here that we have to deal with, adding staff for this would be like ridiculous and foolhardy, really. We have released, got to start counting our dimes and nickels, because these are the days that all politicians dread, when we see the cost of construction and everything, and the cost of maintaining that here in the system that we have. And that's my big concern. So I'm going to have to say no to the chickens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McDermott. Councillor Christensen.
My, through you, Mr. Chair, my general approach, having had a mother-in-law who raised rabbits and chickens in Clinton, Ontario, and in Aalborg, Denmark, before they moved here, and having lived in downtown Toronto, where many of the immigrant neighborhoods raise chickens and rabbits as well, I tend to be much more accepting. My concern, first of all, yes, any cost, I think I'm not sure it's a priority at this point. That's my concern. The other is that I find that some of the people who talk about it are not aware of the fact that it is work. It's a responsibility. You have living creatures, you have neighbors. We had a recent set of submissions about rats in people's backyards, in Councillor Lewis's ward, in fact, in his front yard almost. So there are offsetting concerns. I'm not sure at this point. I would probably support it in any other situation. I'm really concerned that at this point, and I think Councillor McDermott said it far better than I did, that we're going to have a lot of other challenges. And if it's going to require additional staff, that's not the priority I would put on in terms of looking for additional staff to do the very valuable work that the staff do.
Is that all? You good? Awesome. Thank you very much, Councillor Christensen. Before I go back to you, Councillor Noyes, Councillor Flagg, you haven't spoken. You're under no obligation to speak. I just wanted to give you the opportunity before I went back to Councillor Noyes. You're under no obligation. It's completely up to you.
I just feel that I probably should say that I caught chickens as a young kid. Thank you.
Am I the only one? Am I the only one here who grew up in a city and didn't raise chickens and didn't? Wow, I'm the odd man out here. Councillor Noyes, I'll go back to you.
And we can tell.
Yes, you can.
Okay, I must be missing something in this report, because I've been looking where it talks about additional staff, and I don't see it. Can somebody please point me to that paragraph or that line that it says additional staff? It's a staff that's going to be involved, but it's like anything else. Can you please show me where we're going to hire the chicken police?
Mr. Hurlovich, are you able to comment on that, or perhaps even another member of council? Or
Mr. Chair.
It's under financial staffing and accessibility implications on page 3.
Page 3?
Councillor Noyes?
I'm just trying to find it.
The second sentence in that section.
Thank you. Page 3.
Okay, so it says additional staff time. It doesn't mean we're going to need to hire somebody. I'm honestly, I think you may get 5 complaints a year. You know, if we're blowing this way out of proportion, that we're going to have all these people that are going to start growing chicken, having 5 chickens on their property, and everybody's going to be upset, and we're going to go start measuring the size of the coop. I mean, I think that's a bit ridiculous. And I just wanted to comment on Councilor McDermott's thing, and again, tongue-in-cheek. Happy chickens do not live on the large poultry farms. So they're not very happy chickens over there. But anyway, yeah, obviously this is probably not going to pass. And I think right now the cost of eggs is over $6 a dozen. And that's for eggs that are processed. So yes, there's an absolute cost savings. There's also a nutritional value to having into having eggs right there, et cetera. I don't have chickens. I'm not planning on getting chickens. I had enough chickens when I was young. But again, I think we're really doing the public a disservice by anticipating that we're going to have all these problems and it's going to cost so much money. I think that's a bit ridiculous. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. Yeah, I'll go back to Councillor Lewis. For time, I just want to move on. So, Councillor Lewis.
Yeah, and just two comments that I wanted to make on that, and that is with respect to the, let's use the phrase happy chickens. I would definitely wager a bet that a farm that is following the National Farm Animal Care Codes of Conduct for Animal Welfare, which is a real farm, would be a much happier place for a livestock animal than a person who just decided to buy a chicken or a hen off of Kijiji and decide that they are an urban farmer. The second part is 5 complaints and spending a whole bunch of time on something is exactly what the town did with short-term rentals and how long that went on. And I think we've learned from that. But I just go back to, we may have 5 complaints, we may have 10 complaints, but I think we've learned the lesson in terms of how far we need to go down that road when there may be a big issue for some, but not necessarily a big issue for all. And those are my only comments.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I'll give you 15 seconds.
The short-term rentals had about 10 years of public input, and
Thank you very much, Councillor Noyes. You made that very quick. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor?
Put both hands up.
All those opposed? I would have voted in favor, Councillor Noyes. I would have done that, but that's defeated. Thank you very much. So I'm going to now move on. So that's all our reports for the evening. Any new business or inquiries anyone wishes to raise this evening under Planning and Development Services? Your Worship.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise the issue about the most recent episode of tree and shrub clearing that has occurred at the intersection of Craft and Dominion Roads. And just to update members of council and the public, and that is that the region is going to be meeting tomorrow with the owner of the property. I believe that a member of our staff will also be involved in that. And I've had some conversations with the CAO about things that we might be able to do between now and whenever we get a draft tree bylaw before us. And it looks like that might be the fastest route. But I think we need to, if that's the case, then I think that we should be trying to accelerate that work. And maybe the CAO can comment on the acceleration of that, because I, for one, and I think we all are tired of getting phone calls from people who all of a sudden now on a Friday afternoon or a Sunday morning are hearing the chainsaws going off and the trees coming down. And they're typically not people from Fort Erie. That there's not a general exemption on that. But most of these individuals are people who don't even come from Niagara. And so that's quite disturbing, I think, in the sense that they do change the landscape of our community, which we're trying so hard to make sure that we can protect. So I wonder if the CAO has some comments on the quickest route to get to where we need to get on this.
Certainly, and I'm glad you raised this, Your Worship, because I had a number of residents actually raise this with me over the weekend, and they were actually quite pleased to hear that we were on it. But Mr. McQueen, do you have anything to add?
Thank you. Through the chair, I have had a number of discussions both with the mayor, some of the councillors, concerned residents, and our director of Planning and Development Services regarding this issue. And the town, certainly from the strategic planning work, it's very clear that this council is very committed to environmental protection and natural asset preservation. And so we have encountered recently a number of issues where tree clearing has happened, through a number of different means. And the intention really is to look at the tree preservation bylaw and tighten it up. So there isn't the opportunity for, huge tracts of land being deforested without any sort of municipal conservation authority or regional opportunity to enforce or put a stop to it or control it. And so my most recent conversation with the Director of Planning and Development Services was that we would make every effort to expedite the tree preservation bylaw and bring that before council as early as possible. I know that it was council's wish to do some public consultation as well. So just trying to be mindful of, ensuring that open process, but also accelerating council's wish to put an end to this. We're also going to look at doing some promotion and communication out to the public, just to let them know that this is not an acceptable practice in the town of Fort Erie, and that we will be looking at a tree preservation bylaw, which will be much more restrictive and streamlined in terms of our ability to do enforcement. And so that will come as soon as possible. I'll have further consultation with our Director of Planning and Development Services and provide some timeline to council on when they could expect that.
Thank you for that, Mr. McQueen. That's excellent information. Your worship? Is there anything else?
No, that's good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Noyes.
Well, along the same lines, just going a little bit further, we had a recent thing on Switch Road, and I won't mention any names. There's a cease and desist order. Didn't seem to care. We have no idea, and the NPCA put the cease and desist order on it. The person who is not a stranger to the town, is a well-known contractor to the town, gets many, is a successful bidder on many of the contracts for the town, doesn't, and to me, there's something wrong with that. When we're doing an evaluation and we're giving points for this and points for that and points for that, and we know that certain people are just, like when it comes to their business, they'll toe the line, but when it comes to other things for the town, it's like, I can pay the penalty, so I'll do it, and bill me, fine me, that's fine, go right ahead. I'm still gonna do it, and if I get caught, I get caught. If I don't, I don't. That type of thing. I think that we need to really encourage, and I think we, on a more practical basis, good practice, not just in what they're bidding for, but how they contribute to the town on a general basis. And maybe they should lose some brownie points if they are known to have not followed the rules when it comes to tree preservation or done certain things that they know that they shouldn't do. I don't know how to really phrase all that, but when I read some of this and I read some of the reports and who obtained who was a successful candidate, and it says, it kind of says, they do wonderful work and they know the town well, and et cetera, et cetera. But nowhere in there does it say, unfortunately, they don't obey all the rules of the town, and they rather pay the fine than obey the rules. I think some of that has to start coming into when we decide who gets the contracts and who doesn't. It can't just be about dollars and cents, because if it is, then what message are we sending the contractors? We're finding them over here, and we're giving them a $2 million contract over here. Anyway, that's my comment.
Thank you, Councillor Noyes. Any other new business inquiries? Councillor McDermott.
I just want to go back to what Councillor Noyes was saying, and that is this is happening way too often where this goes on. Like, I do agree that they should be fined, but they should be fined something substantial in order to get the message. And, maybe when we're putting that bylaw together, if they're going to constantly break the bylaw, well, maybe they should pay some pretty hefty fines. Here we are trying to protect our natural heritage. They're not helping us at all. I mean, a hefty fine's in order, I think. I don't know how you can control, I suppose you can if you have the list of people that regularly build here. Maybe that point system could come into effect. But you know what? If we're not going to find them and find them big, they're not going to get the message. So, I think what we do is we have an educational portion where we point out how these trees are being taken down throughout the community. The people are outraged at this, no matter where you live. And they're more than happy to pick up the phone and tell us about it. And then the penalty is slim to none. So we have to make a penalty there that they're not going to ever want to do it again. So although I don't agree with the chickens, I do agree with you on that one. And I think that we should, make that part of our strategy for sure.
Thank you very much, Councillor McDermott. Councillor Christensen, new business or inquiry?
I'd just like to add to this.
Yep.
Councillor Noyes triggered something in my mind. I think perhaps rather than giving points in our procurement policy and our procurement procedures, you get points for various things. I'm sure that's sort of, I think, standard practice. I think there should be compliance or lack thereof with council priorities. So you don't comply with our priorities around the environment and tree protection, minus 30 points. I don't know, I leave it up to staff, but it's a suggestion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Christensen. Councillor Noyes. Oh, actually, before I go back to you, I'm okay. You're fair enough. Councillor Noyes.
And I thank you for the support. I can, if I can read Mr. Welsh's mind, he's going, we are really limited to the number of contractors we can have, and if we start eliminating contractors who can do the job, we may not get the job done. I'm just pretending to read your mind here, and it is a catch-22 that the contractors kind of know they got us, painted in a corner there. But again, I do wish that they would comply with our rules, don't do the clear cutting, be better stewards of that. But I think they also know that there's only so many people in the game, and that find them what you want. But I don't know how we're going to get over that unless we start getting them to really buy into our. I think we have 3 of our pillars, if I'm not mistaken, contain environmental and climate change, etc. And I see this as a dilemma, but I think it's something we do need to challenge, and we do need to maybe, embarrass them into it if we can. I don't know if we can cost them into it, but embarrass them into behaving appropriately. But anyway, thank you.
No, and thank you for the comments. It's for me, it's particularly frustrating because we have so many challenges with development and the changes that are happening in our community. And the one thing that gets everyone's back up is when they go start tearing down trees and altering property before approvals have been put in place. It makes our job very difficult. It makes it very difficult for us to govern effectively in this community. So I'm glad that was raised. Your Worship, you had something else?
Yeah, just on that point, it is rather short-sighted because as you've just commented, any property owner, any developer that creates anxiety, frustration, disgust in the community creates a problem for every other developer. That's just the way it happens. And so listening to all of the comments that have been made, it seems to me that the tool that we're looking to utilize is the tree preservation bylaw. And that's where I think we need to make sure that we've got the penalties. And there may be some other routes that we could look at, but certainly that's when we need to get that in place. We also need, and I've asked the CAO about making sure that we get out some communications messages, particularly to large property owners, because that's what seems to be hit. I'm a little shocked at some of the developers in town, what they've done over the last several years, but we've got a lot of good developers as well, and let's not forget about that. So let's focus on the tree preservation bylaw and then see if there are other things that we can do, but certainly we need to deal with it.
I agree, Your Worship. Are there any other new business or inquiries, or can we move on to the business status report? Any questions or comments? Looks like we have looks like we have a memo and 2 reports on the 16th and a few things coming back on the 23rd. Questions, comments? All right, in that case, Your Worship, I hand the chair back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That takes us into infrastructure services, Councillor Noyes.
Well, thank you, Mayor Redekop. Infrastructure Services is now in session. There are no presentations and delegations. And I did want to speak to report number 10.2, the ditch alteration and maintenance policy. So I'm wondering if I can turn the chair over to Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That brings us to, reports 10.2.1. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Noyes?
Thank you. And I do know where this is coming from. I just wonder if we can perhaps simplify it. I did have a chance to talk to Mr. Walsh earlier today, too, in that it's like the $50,000 put aside for a staff person to kind of probably do everything we asked them to do, but now on reflection, I'm hoping that we can just, if we're going to invest $50,000, that we put $50,000 over here. We don't do how do you say, we don't go look at all the ditches that might count, whatever. We get some criteria that say, okay, for the ditches A, B, and C, it's considered too deep for someone to mow. And if they complain, we're not going to go knock on their door and say, do you want us to mow your ditch because it's more than 3 feet deep and it's too steep? I'm not saying that we're doing that, but we put the $50,000 aside. We have some criteria, what ditches we would think, what the criteria would be for a ditch that would be difficult to mow. And when we get a complaint, you look at that particular ditch, that particular situation and say, yay or nay, no, it's unreasonable to expect this. And yes, we will get someone in to mow it for you. I don't think we're going to get a lot of requests. I really don't. And I don't think, my big issue at the beginning was that it was going to be a means test, and I don't think it should be a means test. I think if it's unreasonable to expect someone to do it and they're saying, I can't, then we send somebody in to do it and we use that $50,000 to offset those costs. That's my suggestion.
Councillor Noyes, was there a question to the director or just a comment on that one?
If Mr. Walsh wants to comment, that's fine.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I kind of look at this program similar to our windrow clearing program when we plow in the winter. We have a number of residents that, due to both physical and financial difficulties, cannot clear the windrow from the snowplow when we blow by. We have very little uptake on it. Maybe 10. I think the number's 6, but maybe 10. It's a minimal amount that we set aside for this, and we're happy to do this. That's kind of what we were aiming at, and maybe the message didn't come across to council that way, but that's what we were aiming at with our ditch mowing program here. For those that can't afford it, we would get a contractor to go in and do it, or use our own forces, whichever. Councillor Noyes has slightly different opinion on affordability versus just if you can't, which I'm fine with. I think the number of ditches in front of people's houses that we're talking about are very minimal in number, and in terms of financial commitment from the town, it would be similar to our windrow clearing program, and that was the point of our memo. My apologies to council if it didn't come across that way, but that was our point. So I agree with Councillor Noyes in this, and if council sees fit that if it's just a physical issue with the size of the ditch, we can get it done. We don't expect a very large impact at all on the town's finances. I think John Jensen just had a stroke over there, but whatever.
Thank you, Director Walsh. Anything further, Councillor Noyes?
No, and I just appreciate it. I think that's the logical way to go. At the end of the year, we can see if there's been a huge demand. But again, I do think there needs to be some criteria. But anyway.
Duly noted, Your Worship.
That's all.
Yeah, I'd just like to move the recommendations that appear in our agenda, which are slightly different than the recommendations in the report itself. It's a recommendation that we receive the memorandum from Ms. Penelaggi and that we only go with the first recommendation in the report.
Okay, and we have one other counselor. Councillor Dubanow, you had your hand up, so I wonder if we could go to you and then back to,
Yeah, it was just a very brief comment to touch on what Councillor Noyes raised. I agree with her thought process on this, and it's a very small number. I mean, there's a particular neighborhood in my ward where this has been an issue, but it's only three. Well, it has been an issue, but it's consistently 3 or 4 individuals I hear from. It's not a big number, although one individual has a fairly long section of ditch. I'm glad to hear from Mr. Walsh that the means testing isn't necessarily a hard and fast requirement. I disagree with means testing on this, and the reason being that when it comes to driveway windrows, we're not going to give you a ticket or have a bylaw infraction if you don't mow your driveway. That's completely up to you. And if you want to be snowed in till the snow melts, that's completely up to you. That is your right. You can, if you've got a truck, you can back right over the windrow, and believe me, I have. It's a little different with the ditching situation, because if neighbors call in and complain, there is a bylaw aspect to that. And if we're talking about bylaw enforcement, I think if it's a ditch that is not maintainable by the resident, I don't think means testing should come into play. I think we should take care of that, both for the resident who lives in that property as well as the neighbors who have a complaint. So I'm happy to hear about that. That was just my comment on that. I'll go back to you, and I appreciate having the opportunity to speak to that.
thank you, Councillor Dubanow. Any other members of council? Back to you, Your Worship. You made the point that this is for information purposes.
Yeah, that's what the agenda calls for. So the recommendation in the agenda is slightly different than the report. So I'm going to move the recommendation contained in the agenda. So it would be the first recommendation in the report only, plus the receipt of the memo for information purposes.
So everybody clear on the motion on the floor? That being on the floor, all those in favor?
Whoa, hold up. So we're eliminating the second.
So that's right. Because we have to wait to get information.
Councillor Noyes?
I do want to thank Jennifer for putting all this work. There's a lot of work, but it really kind of opened our eyes and for all the right reasons. But I don't want her to feel that her work was not good. It was good, and it helped us make a decision.
I think that comment is unanimous from council, so Director, you can take that back to staff. The mayor has that on the floor. All those in favor?
No. So if you look at the agenda, we're going to receive the memorandum that we've received, and then we're going to adopt only the first recommendation in the report itself. Council receives report IS 2023 for ditch alteration and maintenance policy for information purposes. So it's actually different, but it's only dealing with the first part.
Madam Clerk, are you clear for the purpose of the minutes?
So I'm moving what's in the agenda, tonight's agenda.
Can I make a suggestion? That we, given council's thoughts tonight on the original report and sort of the intent, I see where you're going, that we withdraw this report and we'll come back next month with a new report that lays out exactly what we're going to do. I think I understand council's wishes.
Well, I think we can accept this for information purposes. That's not a problem. And the memo that came with it. The other two things won't go forward because we're going to be waiting for additional information.
Mr. Walsh?
Oh, okay, fair enough. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Madam Clerk, are we clear on where we're going? Perfect. So back to the motion. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. We'll turn the chair back to the Chair of Infrastructure Services to complete the portion.
Thank you for carrying the heavy load there. That brings us to new business inquiries. I have one. It was brought up again today about Westbrook and the drainage issues there. I think was Westbrook, wasn't it? Councillor Lewis is looking at me. But anyway, I think that's something that we do need to look at. There's been, I think a few of them said they called a few times over the years and nothing changes, so they're just saying it's something, a condition they have to live with, but I don't think anybody should have to live with their backyard being flooded every heavy rain. I don't think that's acceptable. And I'm sure, we can probably come up with some solution, for an engineering solution to perhaps improve the drainage there before we make it worse. That's my inquiry. Any others? Nobody else? Okay, that's fine. Then brings us to business status report. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, infrastructure services is now closed. I hand the chair back.
Thank you very much, Councillor Noyes. Councillor McDermott, over to you for corporate and community services.
Thank you, Worship. Corporate and Community Services is now in session. We have no presentations and delegations. We do have a couple of reports. Could somebody move CS 06-2023? Councillor Christensen. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. And the member for CS 08-2023, Your Worship. Any comments or questions? Councillor Noyes, and then His Worship.
Is this the one about budget planning?
Budget planning, yes.
I know I'm not going to be here the November, but I can probably Zoom in if it's allowed. If it's allowed, I'm not on vacation.
All of November?
I'm gone from the 23rd to 8 days later. So,
Okay, so
I'm babysitting in Toronto. So
you'll miss the preliminary capital budget bylaw,
yes.
but you'll be here for the budget deliberations, capital budget deliberations on the 15th of November.
Okay, I'm on the wrong report here. Oh, I'm still on the wrong report. This thing jumps around a lot, It does, it really does. So
Yes, yeah.
I did get the dates, and I did call my daughter and say, when am I babysitting? It's
Last page in the report.
Yeah, it's Monday, November 27th. I'm not going to be here that day.
That's only for the bylaw.
That's a preliminary capital budget bylaw. I'm not here that day.
We proceed without you?
Well, like I said, can I zoom in?
Not unless you meet the criteria.
I'm not on vacation.
Are you working?
I'm not
Planning on
working.
being ill?
I can feel, well, I am babysitting 3 children, so I may need a mental health break. So I think I feel a migraine coming on, but anyway, no. If I miss it, I miss it, but if I can zoom in, that would be fine too. I'm just giving you guys a heads up that that's not a date that I'm going to be here.
Anybody else? Your Worship.
Yeah, I just want to say that, this is the beginning of a very difficult budget year. This may be, aside from COVID, which everything was completely unknown territory, this may be one of the most challenging because we're coming out of COVID. We've been hit with significant capital cost, project increases, all construction costs because of the delay in getting materials, what have you, inflation. We were able to brag, or I was able to brag a couple of years ago that we had actually met our infrastructure gap. And now the explosion of construction costs has had a major impact on our capital projects. The report indicates that staff has to look at whether we can actually do all the work in the 10-year work plan that we hoped we could do. The money's just not available, so we're going to have to look at that, change that around a bit. Losing development charges through the provincial government's policies really doesn't help. And I guess my question on that would be to Mr. Jansen. Have we heard from the province yet when we can expect to get the money that will make us whole on that?
Mr. Jansen.
In short, through you, Councillor McDermott, no. They have announced, I believe, a few audits, the results of which are not known. They're for larger municipalities. So a couple of the larger DC firms in Ontario are working with municipal finance in Ontario and with AMO and others to come up with better ways of communicating and advocating for those lost amounts, but I really don't have much of an update for you.
And, and I think we all felt when we heard that promise that was going to be another one of those off the cuff, seemed like a good idea promise at the time, and may or may not ever be fulfilled. And it's just another example of how incomprehensible some of the housing policies are in Ontario right now. So, Chair, this is going to be a difficult budget year. I'm glad that you're there. I'm glad that this group is here. I'm glad that we've got the staff that we have, because I know that even with the difficult year coming forward, we're in a pretty good starting place in terms of some of the other municipalities. One only has to look at the region's anticipated start, and I'm getting heartburn already thinking about it. I don't think, and my message is this isn't the end. I mean, this is where we're starting, but and I know staff has done a lot of heavy lifting to get us here. I want to thank all of them, but we've got to make sure that we can make not only the operation here sustainable, but living here affordable. That's our challenge.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I tend to agree. We have the best treasurer around, and just as equal in the staff that he has. We're very fortunate to have these people in finance. You know what? For every person we've lost here, we've been incredibly lucky and blessed by the people we get on. And anybody that goes into finance, remind them of that. Because at this point, they have the toughest job around, really. Infrastructure can't spend money without finance. So there is a fine balance, and I guess we're looking forward to the challenge because we really have no choice. So anyway, thank you for that, Your Worship.
Yeah, and I just wanted to make sure that it's clear that I meant all of the staff, because there's been a lot of work that's gone into getting us to where we are right now.
That was pretty much implied, sir.
Yep.
Are there any new business inquiries?
Do we have to vote on this? Yeah, we need to vote on this.
Oh, yeah. It's late. Past my bedtime, it's past 7:30, as everybody knows. All in favor? Carried. Any new business inquiries? Anything on that riveting business status report? Seeing none, back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Councillor McDermott. That then takes us to scheduling of meetings. Any meetings coming up? Councillor Dubanow.
Yes, Your Worship, we have a Planning and Development Services Business Subcommittee meeting tomorrow. It's in Conference Room 1 here at Town Hall at 3:15 p.m.
Any other meetings? Councillor Christensen.
Through you, Your Worship, we have a meeting of the Town of Fort Erie Seniors Advisory Committee at 10 a.m. On Wednesday, October 4th at the Douglas Heights Seniors Center, and at 5:30 p.m. we have the Ridgeway Business Improvement Area Board of Management meeting at 5:30 at the Crystal Ridge Library.
Do you not have a community health meeting coming up?
Yes, I believe it's October 17th. I've
Yes,
submitted,
okay, so
yes.
that's quite some way. Okay. If there aren't any others, Councillor McDermott.
Yes, tomorrow night at the Embrace Center, I have a Bridgeburg VIA meeting, 6 o'clock.
Councillor Dubanow, over to you.
Yes, Your Worship. I'd like to move that council and committee adjourn at 9:49 PM this evening.
All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you.